across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I mean, hey, someone's got to be, eh? It's fast approaching 3 minutes past 10 o'clock, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio, whether you're watching on YouTube, any of the ways of watching and listening, it's fantastic to have your company. If you do want to catch up on anything we did yesterday, very few tweets put out on the show yesterday, so you want to have a look at, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, and you can hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Awful lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about that vigil in London last night for Jason Arday. It's estimated some 30,000 people were there. I don't think 30,000 can actually fit into Trafalgar Square and the sort of numbers looking at the vintage, but there was certainly a huge number of people there wanting to pay tribute to the late Cambridge academic. But some extraordinary things were said by people who were speaking at what was supposed to be a sort of a day to an evening to remember somebody who has, we believe, taken his own life. But instead, there was a lot of blaming of a vicious media campaign, talk of how he had been assassinated. He was the victim of assassination, and how he was the victim of a lynching. Highly racialised, very, very, very disturbing language that was being used by not just random people speaking, by, you know, a peer of the realm, for goodness sake. We will be talking about that with someone who was actually there last night. Also going to be discussing the Housing Secretary, Angela Rayner, softening planning rules for traveller sites, because brilliant idea, giving councils fewer ways to block them. I'm sure that's going to go down really, really well. Also, Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice has said people should stop being doom and gloom about global warming. It's going to be good for the economy, particularly for English wine, which is true. Probably a little bit, Richard, we're friends, but a little bit Marie Antoinette sounding. The Guardian, the Mirror, understandably, of course they would, have gone for him on this, but really what we should be talking about is, of course, reforms plans. We had Robert Jenrick on JK's show earlier, their Treasury spokesman, talking about their plans to shake up benefits and save what they claim would be best part of 50 billion quid, even if it's not even that, even if it's 10 billion off that. Thumbs up, I think, from taxpayers across the country. Meanwhile, Andy Burnham's solution to cost of living crisis and disability benefits is to enable disabled people in England to be able to travel 24 hours on buses from next year, as opposed to after 9:30am until 11pm, which they currently are in everywhere in the country, apart from, guess where, Greater Manchester. I don't know how many severely disabled people who need their bus passes are travelling on night buses at 3am, but there we are. Lots to talk about. I mean, small matter of Russia threatening Britain over the use of British-made drones by Ukraine in Russian territory. Nothing to worry about, I'm sure. We're going to talk about all of that, everything. I want your thoughts on every topic. In particular, I do want to hear about your thoughts on the Jason Arday vigil last night. It was all over the tellies. It was streamed live. Huge number of posts. It's the only story on social media for, what, the fourth, fifth day in a row. Claims that the Cambridge professor, who's believed to have taken his own life on Friday, was assassinated and was lynched, basically because of the colour of his skin, and that his death was as a result of a racist media campaign. What is your reaction to that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. You want to talk about those benefit changes, you want to talk about traveller sites in your area, any of the other big topics, do get in touch. Can't wait to hear from you. Delighted to say that joining me today is editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Morning to you.
Morning.
You were at the vigil last night. You are a journalist. You've attended a lot of things like the anti-asylum hotel protests and like, and you're there as an independent watcher. We had lots of TV cameras as well. Let's just play a quick clip of what one peer, Lord Simon Woolley, had to say. He was among a number of well-known speakers, prominent figures who talk about race issues an awful lot. Diane Abbott, Dawn Butler, two Labour MPs included. And this is what Lord Woolley had to say.
This is tough for me, as it's tough for all of you and the hundreds and thousands of people in the UK and around the world who are appalled by the public assassination of Jason Ard. The lynching. The lynching.
You were there. You heard that speech live. I mean, I can understand. I mean, look, it's not a vigil I would have attended. But I can understand people who did feel strongly about this issue, about Jason Ard wanting to attend a vigil. They're entitled to do so. That didn't smack of remembering somebody's life, paying tribute to him or comforting his family, to me. Talking of assassination and lynching. What did you make of that when you heard it live?
Yeah, because I must have been stood about 10 foot away from Lord Willie when he made those comments. And as you say, having a vigil for Jason Ard and some of the speeches that were given and some of the comments that were made, not least by Lord Willie about their own friendship with him and
there were other people there who spoke who did actually know him.
Absolutely, spending time with him in his final days and how much of a loss it was for them personally. But it wasn't just a vigil, it was a kind of demonstration, it was a protest of sorts, and the message of it was very clear. It was that Jason Ard was the victim of an assassination, of a lynching by a racist mainstream media, and the problem with that is that it's untrue. And I think we should resolve from pointing this out. We all know.
I don't think you're even allowed to do that, Tom. I think you'll find the lanyard classes will get very upset if you point out that what is being claimed is not true.
And all you have to do is track back the story. I mean, the reason that Jason Ard became a national newspaper headline was because he was a very prominent academic, someone who I think it's fair to say looked for the kind of media limelight, and yet it turned out that his career was built on not just alleged plagiarism, also alleged academic fraud, falsifying data, which is something that has gone by the wayside a little bit in the discussion, but also a series of totally fantastical stories.
I mean, we'd never have heard of him if Cambridge hadn't lauded him because he was the youngest black professor at Cambridge University, one of the best universities in the world. We wouldn't have heard of him if he was a professor who was white, who was a, you know, I don't know, Manchester Metropolitan University and a plagiarist. We wouldn't have heard of him.
Yeah.
And not because he would have been white, because of he was lauded because ... but also because of these amazing claims about his life, the marathons, the 5 million for charity, being a mute until the age of 11, being autistic, being illiterate until 18, all of having had a brain tumour for his exams,
and also having claimed,
none of which has been found to be true.
Also, which having claimed to have been the target of racist intimidation and violence, which again was not substantiated by the police or by any available evidence.
And which newspaper was the one that exposed that was not substantiated?
The Guardian newspaper.
The Guardian, a well-known racist right-wing newspaper.
And this is to the point that I take no particular pleasure in recounting this story in the wake of what's happened, but history is being rewritten. There were constant comments from the platform last night that he had been exonerated of plagiarism, referring to, let's face it, a pretty cursory examination of his PhD thesis from Liverpool John Moores University, who awarded it, who probably have a bit of a vested interest in making that story go away. And this particular claim that this was the work of a racist mainstream media, as you say, The Guardian, The New York Times, The Atlantic, these are all liberal left outlets who published, to my mind, some of the most devastating exposés of the untruths of Jason Ard. On top of that, the idea that The Spectator or The Telegraph or The Times, all three of which, by the way, got name-checked from the stage last night to boos and hisses and chants of shame on them, were pursuing this story not because Jason Ard was black, but because he had lied, but because
every time they looked into things, the next thing would be exposed. So someone on TikTok going, he wasn't mute, I was at primary school with him. I mean, he was chatty all the time. And other school friends going, no, he talked all the time, he wasn't mute.
The reason the story kept developing is because more and more was being found out. And
because he'd made so many claims.
I know.
And then there was a memoir that was published last week, which we understood, lots of the claims in that, not true. Again, a memoir, autobiography, not true. But also, we found out that the original draft made even more extraordinary claims.
And the details were changing
and he even changed it, which cancer he claimed to have suffered from.
And to be talking about this now, again, is not to detract from the horrendous human tragedy in the midst of all of this.
For his family,
his family, his friends. No one likes to think of anyone, no feeling human being likes to think of anyone in that kind of dark place where they end up making the worst and most final of decisions. But we can't allow people to leap on this, I think in quite a shameful fashion, to pursue their pre-existing political agendas, one of which is to suggest that vast swathes of the country are riddled with racism when that is simply not the case, and in particular here to suggest that the press killed this man for racist reasons. That is
the allegation.
It's an outlandish, outrageous, despicable allegation, not least because it's not borne out by the evidence. People who are very close to Jason Arday, I wouldn't chide them for coming to their conclusions as to what happened, to looking to lay blame in certain places. That's a
people
kind
are
of,
angry, people are upset.
That's human. But when you see activists jumping on this, when you see people who previously have just always had an interest in, say, regulating the press, trying to use this tragedy as a soapbox, that I think we have to call out.
Good Law Project, again, they had this mass. They're the ones who organised the original letter. Some 17,000 of the great and the good signed it in support of him. Again, accusing people, claiming that he, questioning his role at Cambridge. This is weeks before he took his own life, we believe, but claiming that it was motivated by racism. Again, no basis. 17,000 people signed that letter, which I thought was an outrageous thing to do without any evidence whatsoever. But they now got another petition, and we've got 100,000 names for calling for a public inquiry into this. Lots of calls for, there's one basically calling for a limit on the number of articles that could be written about something. These are the people from Hacked Off calling for, Leveson 2, which is basically massive controls on the media. They're all joining in on this, and again, and asking for donations. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, some extraordinary stuff that is going on online. It seems to me, what I saw last night, I thought we are in Black Lives Matter's 2020 George Floyd territory, where a man, George Floyd's death was absolutely outrageous. There's no evidence, interestingly, that he was murdered by the police because he was black. Actually, this police officer was a horrible human being who had done this to a number of people who were white, by the way, and there were black police officers involved in his death. But that was just taken out of all perspective. It was something that happened in another country, in another policing jurisdiction, and then was turned into riots here in 2020. The world was going utterly mad with lockdown. And we've had anyone, taking the knee, BLM this, BLM that, mainstream media completely falling quite literally on their knees. Keir Starmer, the then Labour leader, and his deputy, Angela Rayner, photographing themselves on their knees, police officers on their knees, basically treating a man who was a wife beater, a drug addict, a convicted felon, as if he were somehow a saint. The events for him, treating him in that way, is this is a horrible death and it shouldn't have happened, and quite rightly the cop was prosecuted, but treating it as something far more than what it was. And I'm seeing the same territory here. I'm not in any way saying Jason Arday is in any way equivalent to George Floyd, but Jason Arday, as far as we are aware, died at his own hand. That is very, very sad for his family and his friends. I would not wish that on anyone. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be exposing the truth where the truth can hurt people, because the reason the truth needed to be exposed was because of the lies that were told. No. And that, as far as I'm concerned, that is a matter that people need to rest with their own consciences. But if we are basically saying, which I think is what the message is, there can be no criticisms of anybody who is not white-skinned, because you're going to be accused of racism, or because someone might take their own life. We cannot criticise anybody. But I would love to know why it is a lot of the people who are saying these witch hunts can't go on. A lot of these people are the same people who have witch hunted people like J.K. Rowling, a powerful, rich woman. But, oh my God, they have tried to break her. She ain't going to be broken for the simple crime of saying men don't become women and women don't have penises. She's never written anything remotely transphobic. In my view, she's very lefty wokey. I doubt for a moment she thinks anything remotely negative about trans people at all, and has certainly never written anything. Their witch hunt against her, against pretty much everybody who refused to take the knee of the BLM, to play along with the trans madness. The witch hunts of people who stand up for Israel. Witch hunts for people who climate deniers. No, I'm not denying the climate. I think people confuse weather and climate. The witch hunts that take place. I mean, I'm not a victim. Never claimed to be. Couldn't care less. You can send me as much abuse as you want. I don't care. It's water off duck's back for me. I've had it for 10 plus years. Doesn't affect me. It affects other people, though. There are other people who are much more upset by it. But the things that I get called. I mean, I've been called by one of my guests last week, so basically saying, likened to what Malcolm X saying, a white devil. Claims of people being racist, of being bigoted, for voting for Brexit. Baby killer, granny killer during COVID. Now I'm a baby killer in Gaza, and loads of people who share my views get the witch hunts. The attempts to shut people down. This has been going on from the very same people who are now saying, oh, this is terrible, the mainstream media shouldn't do this. And I do think the mainstream media need to stand up and go, no, I will not be called this. You cannot call when they claim that this was a racist, witch hunt, assassination, lynching against this man, they are slandering every single person in the media who wrote those articles. It's an outrageous thing, which is exactly, by the way, what Jason Arde did with students who claimed that he wasn't teaching them properly, which he wasn't. They were accused of racism and marked down, calling the police on a journalist and an academic, sending Carter Ruck, the most expensive lawyers in the country, a very threatening legal letter to a journalist simply for doing their job. This is exactly the same sort of thing.
And I completely agree. The press need to stick up for themselves here, because what is being thrown at them...
Not always perfect. No one's claiming that.
This is a despicable slur to suggest that the only reason any of us pursued this story is because of racism. It's simply not true. Also, I think it's important to point out that if this story, or if these allegations, or if questions about Jason Arde and his own account of himself, if they had been listened to earlier, if that reporter at the Times Higher Education hadn't received both a legal letter from Carter Ruck, but also later on a call from the police confirming he'd been investigated for harassment, if the Professor David Harris, who started raising the alarm quietly to Cambridge, to academic journals, quite soon after Arde's appointment back in 2023, if Cambridge could have admitted that they had, let's face it, made a mistake here and for politically motivated reasons, we might not have ended up in a situation where someone who was kind of trapped in his own fantasy land was put on such a high pedestal to which he was always going to be knocked off. The press did their job because Cambridge and other academic institutions didn't do that.
Absolutely. And he should never have been appointed in the first place because he simply did not have the credentials for it. Even the ones he lied about, those credentials were not enough to put yourself in a position where you were a professor at Cambridge University.
And just on that very quickly...
If you look at the last 10 people appointed to those similar roles, he's got nothing like the credentials.
And just on that very quickly, because one of the points that was constantly made last night was the going after Jason Arde is because they don't believe that we, i.e. black people, are smart enough to be at university, smart enough to be professors. You read the New York Times' report about this. It was came out just a couple of days ago. When he was put up for that position, first of all, he was up against, in the kind of interview process, people who were much more academically qualified than him, including 2 women of colour. When you go for the kind of celebrity DEI hire, you were often doing so at the expense of not just academics who are more skilled, but also other black academics who might just not have the celebrity factor, might not
don't have the great backstory about being mutant.
Or also, let's face it, would he have ever got that position if he was a sort of black conservative? I don't think, regardless of how brilliant he was and how illustrious his publishing record might have been, it's so clear what is going on here. This is not about race, this is about politics. And it's about the extent to which that has infected organisations like Cambridge, brought down standards and created tragedies like this, if we're being honest.
But so it's a very, very good point. The idea that this is about, people not believing that black people can be... I mean, again, it's the bigotry of low expectations as well. From again, I don't think Jason Arde is somebody that should be raised as a hero or a role model in this country. I'm sorry. I think it's all a very... It was an intriguing story. It was a fun story for a bit because the claims were so outlandish as they were being exposed. And yet, people like us who've been fighting the woke for years, enjoying the fact that DEI was being exposed for the madness it was. And then when he resigned and he doubled down on the lies, you think, well, this is going to carry on. I'm very sorry that he is not here. I'm very sorry that his family are grieving. I'm more than sorry for his children. But that doesn't mean... the story is not a fun story anymore. It was fun. It was fun when it was ridiculous claims that were being defended on ridiculous grounds. But then it was absolutely not fun when there were racism allegations and the police and all those stories emerged. And it certainly became a very serious story when he took his own life. And no one's pretending anything different. But to claim that it was a lynching, to claim that it was an assassination is so deeply worrying. And I'm telling you, if that was a white man, not a black peer, Lord Woolley saying that at Trafalgar Square in front of a large crowd of angry people, I think the police would have got involved and said that was incitement of some sort. I think people would have legitimately claimed that that was something that needed to be possibly investigated. And I think that is very, very, very worrying. And that is not doing anyone in this country any good. Look, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about traveller sites. Angela Rayner paving the way for more traveller sites. These are planning changes that she's looking at, basically making it easier. One of the issues apparently is what's happening is that, you know, travellers basically, you know, gypsy community, they suddenly just move into a field. They sort of take over, they buy the field sometimes, and then basically they wait until sort of 6:01. Well, probably 5:01 on a Friday afternoon for local council close their doors, and then they start building. The cement goes down, they're setting up, and by the time council are back in on Monday morning and they start reading all the complaints from locals going, hey, what the hell's just happened? There's no planning permission for it. It's already done. And basically more of this is going to happen.
And it's one of those things which any area that has been affected by it just becomes such a huge problem, because surely the rules, whether it's about planning, whether it's about anything else, have to apply to everyone equally, and when they don't, or when people take advantage of them or continually take advantage of them in a particular area, of course it's going to get people's backs up. So anything which even appears like it's making that easier seems to me to be on a hiding to nothing. But I don't know what. But
also,
why
should the rules be different? Why, you know, why do I need to get planning permission to put up trellis and a shed in my back garden, but someone could just build some, and it's not instantly not down? I mean, I know people genuinely who don't like basement extensions in my area who didn't get full planning permission. What they did, the councils made them fill it in with cement. Then they apply for company, and then they can take it out. I mean, genuinely, you know, the punishments are very severe for homeowners who don't obey planning rules, and quite rightly. I feel strongly about people. You know, the rules are there for everybody, and everyone has to make, but not for one particular group, and it doesn't seem that works for me. What do you think about Reform and their announcement about, the huge announcements about, you know, foreigners not being allowed to claim, unless you are a British citizen in this country, but how long you've lived here, you worked here, you're not going to be allowed to make benefit claims, but also that reforming PIP, basically, trying to get basically 2.8 million people off disability claims, largely mental health claims, which are mild and simply have no reason why, because you've got this particular claim, you should need, you know, hundreds of pounds more a week. But there are also benefit claimants who are able to work, 330,000 of them, should do 20 hours of community work a week in their local community. I mean, I have to say, this will motivate people, will it not, if the councils can get their act together enough to actually get them to do it?
No, that's a very good point. And I think as a package of announcements, it's very clear that what Reform are very keen to do is make clear that, as they would put it, they're putting British citizens first, because I think there is a extent to which, whether it's in relation to our benefit system, whether it's in relation to ongoing kind of migration policies, there's been a sort of dilution about what British citizenship means. You have the kind of indefinite leave to remain, which I do feel for a lot of people who are on ILR, who basically never went the whole move to get British citizenship, despite all intents and purposes being British, having raised kids in this family, set down roots, integrated, because there was kind of didn't need to. But the kind of bleed between those two categories has become a big problem, because it's kind of confused. OK, at what point do you become a proper member of this national community, therefore able to access, whether it's housing, benefits, healthcare, whatever, in the way that everyone else can. So it's about kind of putting down that particular marker and that becoming a real dividing line with them and other parties.
But then there's also an argument that's, you know, happy to bring people in who are a net benefit to the country. Most migrants are not a net economic benefit to the country, even if they're doing worthwhile labour. A lot of people aren't working. The vast majority of people who've been coming in recently are dependents. They aren't working. They're a cost. But when they're not working, they're no longer a net benefit, and most of the people are not earning enough to be a net benefit even while they're working. At which point, well, do we have a duty of care that once people have lived here, even if it's 20 years, that you get to stay here? I mean, that's the question. And maybe a lot of people say, well, actually, you know, these people have been, you know, working, you know, whether it's the NHS or as a teacher or whatever. But again, okay, then get British citizenship and stay here. My worry is British citizenship and indefinite leave to remain have been handed out like sweeties for far too long, and should be something that people have to work towards and earn. And you know, I want you speaking absolutely fluent English. I want you to be a net contributor. I want no criminal record, no otherwise. Bye. Sorry, I really think we're going to have to get very ruthless. And there are going to be some people who are going to lose out as a result. But I think the overall benefit for the country will be good. Andy Burnham, though, he's dealing with reform of benefits and things. He wants to do that because his big announcement, of course, is, again, the man's obsessed with buses. He's got like a bus fetish at this point.
Shades of Boris Johnson. Although I suppose he was painting.
He was painting, yeah, exactly. You remember that? That was
a talk exclusive.
Yeah, it was. Disabled people to get free 24-hour bus travel. Currently, it's from 9:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. But it's going to be extended around the clock, as it has been in, guess where, Greater Manchester. But again, is this the #1 thing that people are looking for? I just find this, like, I mean, I'm sorry, but I just find this utterly bizarre.
I mean, even if, you know, on its own terms, I'm sure a perfectly worthy policy, provided your definition of disability isn't as quite broad as the benefit system.
Yeah, which I'm assuming it is.
These days, you know, if mild anxiety...
I thought they all had mobility cars anyway. I mean, you know.
If mild anxiety gets you a free bus pass, I'm not sure that's a good idea and a good use of money. But you're right. I mean, even if everyone could agree this is a nice idea, works, wouldn't necessarily cost so much, let's do it. The fact that Andy Burnham is fronting all of these quite kind of piecemeal reforms, I think, speaks to the fact that, first of all, he's a very comfort zone politician. He likes things which seem very cuddly, seem very positive, slightly uncontroversial. Anything more thorny kind of backs away from. But also that I just don't think he has a big picture view about political economy or about geopolitics or about where the country needs to go more broadly. So he just kind of busies himself with all of these little announcements and little areas, which is something that would normally be deferred to, you know, not even a Secretary of State, but a kind of, you know, a minister of some description put out to announce these things. So it's telling that he's making these things so part of his pitch.
It's quite bizarre. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this, all topics we're talking about, plenty more besides. We're going to be talking a bit more about Richard Tice getting in trouble over, well, it's English wine, yay for the weather. That said, loving the clouds outside the window today, loving them. There was rain on my patio, which meant it was on the lawn. It must have been on the lawn last night. I'm so excited, as indeed the grass looked happy, what was left of it. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Take your calls up next, and we're going to be talking to the wonderful David Wooding after that. This is Talk.
Demonstrate to the public that you are doing everything.
But the key thing here, as you say, he's the Prime Minister. He has the power, as did previous Prime Ministers, to do things like build more prisons and failed to do so. This has been the first real test of Andy Burnham, where I'm going to please everybody. I'm Mr. Nice Guy. Dan Hodges thinks I'm great. And then he's failed it at the first attempt.
I don't think he's... I don't think
I mean, I've been reading your columns, Dan.
Hodges,
I mean, come on. You think the sun shines out of his backside.
DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Paul is in Portsmouth, wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Paul. What do you want to tell us?
Yes, good morning, Julie. Good morning, Tom. I think this is rapidly now, with Mr. in our days now developing into the UK's own George Floyd moment.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested to hear Tom's opinion after obviously hearing that peer mention in his speech and saying about lynching, what was the atmosphere of the crowd then, because if that wasn't incitement, I really don't know what was, to be honest with you, Julia.
What did you make of that, Tom?
Well, not necessarily at that particular moment, but certainly at moments throughout the whole vigil, there were calls and response of shame, particular publications being mentioned, individuals being mentioned. even, and that was the point at which I wouldn't say it necessarily rose to the level of incitement per se, but the atmosphere became quite sinister at those points. I don't think that's unfair to say, particularly because, as we've been talking about early on in the show, Julia, this was based on a fundamental untruth about the press and the way it was operating.
Paul, what do you say to that?
Yeah, because listening to the actual speech itself as well, and I think Tom was there as well. You know, how this is developing now, Julie. Like, I think you've even mentioned it, that now that they'll be even talking about, probably bringing the Jason Arday law now, that you're not allowed to question, specific people of a certain colour of their qualifications. And then soon we're going to have memorials painted everywhere, and somebody be calling for a statue. It's getting into the realms now. Well, Yeah, well, that's, I mean, the crowdfunder for the funeral, huge sums of money. Is it over £200,000 now? That crowdfunder was for a funeral, then it's a memorial, other things, and to help the family. Again, a memorial. I find that utterly extraordinary myself. Paul, thank you for your call. Martin is in Nottingham. Hello, Martin.
Oh, hello there. Yes, I was born in the middle of London nearly 70 years ago, and I did go last night just to reconfirm what I thought was happening to my once wonderful city, and it was appalling. What was appalling about it? Just the Glastonbury-type race fest that it was. It was nothing to do, I don't think, with being upset about someone dying. It was literally so political. There was even people screaming abuse about Farage, and they're lunatics, aren't they? Yeah, I don't think Farage has even commented at any point.
No, he was certainly called a fascist or something to that effect from the stage at one point. Which again, you talk about demonising people.
Not quite sure that's got anything to do with. Quite extraordinary. So you were there. You didn't like. You felt the atmosphere was not what you would have expected of a vigil for a man who people say they're grieving for.
That's right, and it's more of a personal thing, this, but I just couldn't believe how, what I used to love about the middle of London has just changed dramatically in so many ways. But last night, I should have known better, but it was far worse than I was expecting, to be honest with you, just like a race card festival.
OK, Martin, I appreciate that. Thank you for that call. 10:34 is the time. Up next, I'm going to talk about stuff completely different with Sun columnist David Wooding. Stay tuned for that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:36 isn't time. Thomas Slater still with me. Delighted to say columnist at The Sun, David Wooding, has joined me right now. Morning.
Morning, Julia.
Lovely to see you, the old mucker. I can't tell you how many years we go back. I don't think most people are alive how long we go back.
Let's say we went to school together.
Let's go close to that. Anyway, David, always great to have you on the show. Can you explain what the hell is going on with Angela Rayner's changes to the planning laws and how this is going to pave the way for more basic traveller sites?
Well, it seems that she's tweaking the rules a little bit. So, in one sense, you can local councils can ban traveller sites from setting up if they cause some environmental damage to the local area, or if it doesn't if the site doesn't give them a chance of making up some kind of semi-permanent home there.
Yeah.
And by removing that, it basically pulls the rug from underneath all the councils who might want to do something, because they're two of the great planks which allow them to ban these sites. So with one hand, this government is giving councils more power by devolving and saying we're going to send it local like we did in Manchester, and on the other hand they're saying, well, yeah, but you can't do this.
Yeah, I mean that's the extraordinary thing, is that, I mean, it does appear that certain groups just don't have rules that affect them in the way they do everyone else. Anyone who's decided to build an extension, a conservatory, garden, shed, whatever it is, change, build, anything they want to do to their home, planning, and you get punished like hell by councils if you don't get the full planning, or you go an inch over or anything like that. They will come over and measure it an inch of it's like absolute nightmare, very expensive and time consuming. But it does seem that certain groups are just basically flouting the law, and there's really nothing that can be done, and then basically claim, oh, we're a protected community and we expect the rules to be different because of our lifestyle. I think it's, for people, I mean, something Benedict Spence, who's a regular on the show, obviously, he comes on Wednesdays, but I know he'll want to talk about it tomorrow, because he lives in the countryside, and it's been a very, very big issue in the countryside for years.
Yes, and the countryside are also having the issue with migrant camps and how's multiple occupation being set up. Andy Burnham saying everybody's got to take their fair share of migrants.
It's going down really well, that.
It's going to be migrants in one part of the village, and in the other part of the village you'll have travellers. So the country life isn't going to be quite as idyllic as we thought it would be.
As with everything, when it comes to two-tiered justice, two-tiered policing, two-tiered planning, the rules just need to be the same for everybody. It's the fact, I live in an area where you're not even allowed to sort of have certain style wooden windows. You're not allowed things like double glazing and things like that. But someone could just set up a traveller site at the end of the road where there's space.
Absolutely.
And that would be allowed. And people, it's, again, this is about a British sense of fairness.
Absolutely. And the government are always keen to talk about equality, but when it comes to equality of the rules and equality of the law
for everybody
and the planning, it's not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's also talk about, the heatwave. We have had, a rip-roaring time. I don't know about you. I've never... It's terrible that in August, I think most British people have been waking up overnight this morning and gone, oh, thank God. A lot of us have had a bit of rain, not as much as we would have liked. Our lawns are looking like they might possibly make it to survive. There's grey skies out there. I'm thrilled about it. It's going to be down to like 21 in London late in the week. Yes, then of course I'll toddle off on holiday to somewhere warmer. But I'll be by the sea, and that's different. But I think it's all been too much. We're told there's another heat wave coming again soon. Everyone's had enough, frankly. Now, lots of claims, always on climate change. But Richard Tice, Nigel Farage's number 2, is under attack. He's on the front page of The Guardian and The Mirror. Basically, he's been blasted, say The Mirror, after dismissing the misery caused by the heat wave, which claimed hundreds of lives again, and said Brits should enjoy sparkling wine instead. And basically, he's been branded in. So, we are... Richard, we love you, but we are in Marie Antoinette territory. Yes. But he pointed that we should be... We should heat out the doom and gloom around climate change. I agree with him on that. He urged people to celebrate soaring temperatures. And he says, look, climate change has always happened, it always will. Maybe the smart thing to do is to adapt to it rather than think arrogantly you can stop it. He's old enough to remember 1976. And he says, that was 50 years ago. I think when it's a bit warm, let's enjoy it. And if it means the English wine and sparkling wine gets better and better, fantastic. That means we can take on the French, fantastic. Let's celebrate some of these things rather than just be sort of doom and gloom about it. Now, the reality is English sparkling wine's quite expensive. Damn something more expensive than, say, your Prosecco's, isn't it? But he's got a point. I'm just not sure that's the best way to...
Well, he has got a point, and, I think what he's trying to say is, let's stop moaning about the weather, let's try and enjoy it. On the wine...
we all need aircon,
yeah,
basically.
Well, we do. On the wine issue, it's true that English wine has improved, and that's probably a little bit to 1 or 2 degrees in the temperature. But don't forget the song that you'll remember, because you remember...
All right, he was about to make another age comment then, wasn't he? Oh, I don't think you got away with that. I saw Tom Sater smirk at that.
She'll get me outside behind the bike sheds.
I'll take you.
But Dean Martin, I'm praying for rain in California so the grapes may grow and we can drink more wine. He talks about rain. We haven't had any rain.
Yeah, you do need the rain as well.
You do need the rain as well.
But this is the thing. Climate change and weather are not the same thing. Classic Mirror, and I'm sure The Guardian will have done the same. The heat waves claimed hundreds of lives. 10 times more people die of cold in the winter than die of heat in the summer. We can easily deal with the heat issue. A lot of the people who do die of heat, sadly, are very elderly people who sadly would not have long to live anyway. I'm sorry, I'm going to break this news to everyone. People didn't know this until 2020. Apparently, old people do die. Sorry to break that to people, but that is the case. But also that actually with slightly warmer summers and slightly warmer winters in the future, actually fewer people will die in winter overall and in summer overall, and actually we'll have fewer deaths. So actually, again, this idea that heat waves kill more people, they don't. Actually, more people are living.
It's extremes, isn't it? If you're having an extremely cold winter, you're more likely to die of hypothermia or other issues like that. And if it's a very hot weather, people with respiratory...
Do you know when people die? They die when they can't put their heating on because of high energy costs.
There's another good one.
Net zero. I mean, that's the thing. They've been fighting net zero. What did you make of reforms announced? I mean, more substantial stuff. This was at a press conference he was giving with Robert Jenrick. He was on with JK earlier on the Breakfast Show. What did you make of their welfare reforms? I mean, we had a whole litany of stories over Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and basically, you know, that they were going to cut benefits, you know, HIP for disability, basically 2.8 million people who they think, you know, just simply don't need these benefits, and give more benefits to the people who really do need them for their physical or mental disability. Foreigners not being entitled to claim benefits, but also basically workfare for 300,000 plus people who are able-bodied and could do work in their local council 20 hours a week, as well as looking for work.
Well, it's playing to a big audience who alarm clock Britain, we call them, don't we? The people who get up in the morning.
My listeners, your readers.
Go to work and look at the people across the road who've maybe got the curtains drawn and spend all day sitting in their underpants watching daytime television.
Sounds
watching
great.
Julia Hartley-Brewer. Watching Julia Hartley-Brewer on the telly.
No, it's 10:43. They're not up yet. They're not up yet. Morning. But
that's who it's playing to, and some of this money will be saved by stopping benefits to foreign nationals. That's a different issue, but making people earn what they're given, welfare to work. It was called the same thing Tony Blair did back in 1997. It never really happened because Harriet Harman was the Social Security Secretary and stopped it. But yes, making people work 20 hours a week if they've had benefits for over a year or two, and then
there's a lot to be said in terms of like getting people out of the house. I mean, one of the things that's really bad for people is not working. It's bad for your mental health, bad for your physical health, and it's of course bad for your bank balance, and indeed taxpayers' bank balance as well. But actually, getting people out doing something every day, turn up on time, bit of purpose, being around people, getting their confidence back. I think if I'd been out of work for a year, I think I'd be massive confidence break, wouldn't you? I mean, you would be really, really struggling. You'd be miserable. You know, lose purpose and structure to your day, which most of us need to, you know, to deal with our daily lives. I think it would actually. Again, I think people might think it's cruel. It's cruel to be kind.
Oh, well, and the alarming thing, Julia, is the young people, because, you know, back in the day, it used to be the over 50s, 55s, who had a hard, grinding job all their life.
Physical labour.
And then they sort of went on the invalidity benefit, it was then called, for a few years. Now it's young people. There's a million young people aged 16 to 24 who are not in a school and not in training and they haven't got a job, and it's become a lifestyle choice.
Here's the thing, though. Okay, we often talk about. I mean, hear again and again. You know, it's 1 in 7 young people, and you hear all the time. You know, young people can't find jobs. Young people can't find jobs. Now, it does depend where you live. You live in a former mining village in, you know, North Wales. Things are going to be rather different from, you know, I live in North London. It's very different. However, not 1 in 7 can't find a job or educational training. 6 out of 7 can. Right? Yes. There's a reason. What is going on in those homes, the kids that aren't? And I think a lot of this, again, comes down to parenting. Expectations. Are their parents working? Do they go? Have they been used to the fact you get up on time, you go to work? You go, you know, parents do that, parents go to work, you go to school. The sort of work ethic skills. Did they have to do some chores for their pocket money? You know, these sort of things. All these little things were they expected to go out and, like, get a Saturday job. If they wanted to, you know, pay for the cinema tickets or whatever. Not that young people leave their homes as well anymore. You know what I mean? I think a lot of this comes down to what has gone on in the home.
Well, I was desperate to get to work when I was a teenager. I mean, I wanted to get out of college and get a job. I was never happy that when I got my first job, because I was earning my own money.
Oh, my goodness.
And then started to step up that ladder.
Absolutely. I remember, I mean, I had 3 weekend jobs when I was 15. I don't think I've ever felt richer. I genuinely, I think three, making pub lunches, waitressing and working in a burger takeaway on the till. I thought, I probably had about 20 quid in my pocket at the end of the weekend. Ka-ching!
It's great.
You loved it.
And you're mixing with different people from different backgrounds and getting to know about life generally.
Well, also about work.
Yeah, and a discipline in your life, having to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Great to have you in. Always
a
good
pleasure.
to have you in. David was in, columnist at The Sun. Tom Sledge, you want to come in on this?
No, I think
you're young.
No,
You've
exactly.
probably still got a Saturday job, haven't you, love?
I've only just turned it off, yeah. I'm cutting back my hours because it's picking up here and elsewhere. But no, I completely agree. Even back in my day, at that point about, you turn 15, 16, you start working, it's that taste of independence, and also, as David was saying, just, getting to mix with people of different ages, different backgrounds, and giving you a clear sense of direction in life. Yeah. The fact that that's not only being deprived to young people, because there's actually fewer jobs for young people, not least because of the hike in the minimum wage for young people and national insurance hikes and what have you, but also because they're being kind of incentivised to just take that bit of anxiety or whatever it might be and turn that into a lifestyle. As David says, it's a tragedy.
It really, it's immoral. It's immoral to do that to young people. It really is. 10:47 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking to Adam Smith Institute's Maxwell Marlowe about the latest economic figures and plenty more besides this. It's Talk.
Demonstrate to the public that you are doing everything.
But the key thing here, as you say, he's the Prime Minister. He has the power, as did previous Prime Ministers, to do things like build more prisons and failed to do so. This has been the first real test of Anti-Burnham, where I'm going to please everybody. I'm Mr. Nice Guy. Dan Hodges thinks I'm great. And then he's failed it at the first attempt.
I don't think he's
I've been reading your columns, Dan.
Hodges,
I mean,
Dan Hodges
come on. You think the sun shines out of his backside.
The UK on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:50 is the time. Let's talk to Maxwell Marlowe now. He's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute, the free market think tank. Very good morning to you, Maxwell.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk latest economic news, because obviously, we're still waiting for all that good growth in every postcode. Doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. But we've got the latest unemployment figures, and what do they tell us?
Well, it's growth on every postcard, it seems, Julia. It is so small. It's really quite shocking. Look, today's employment figures are pretty devastating, to be honest. I mean, if we go back a year, we had 700,000 fewer people on universal credit, which means we've got 700,000 more today. It's the numbers on the welfare list keep going up and up and up and up, and it's all to do with national insurance increases from that budget 2 years ago. It's all to do with high energy costs, and it's all to do with the fact that people are losing confidence in the British economy. So, we can see Mr. Burnham's come out with this brilliant plan to have, free bus tickets for people with disability. Free transport wherever you want to go.
24. No, they already did, but not 24 hours.
And now it is 24 hours, Julia, and it is absolutely absurd, because what does that mean? People follow incentives, meaning that more people will probably want to clock on to be disabled, even if that case is negligible, and therefore they won't want to go back to work. Why would you want to go back to work if you get 24/7 free travel? I don't get 24/7 free travel.
It is quite extraordinary. I mean, the unemployment rate has stayed at 4.9%, but again, this is high, and the number of vacancies has gone down. We're back to sort of 2014, post-economic shock territory. But as you say, the number of universal credit claims, it's hit a record 8.4 million.
Yes,
and the amount of working
disaster.
households has fallen at the same time. As you say, 700,000 more people. Now, this is bizarre, though, because this isn't stuff they can blame on the Tories and 14 years of Tory failure. This is since Labour have been in power. They've been in power 2 years, and in last year, 700,000 more people claiming this. This despite the pledge to, quote, get Brits working.
Yes, exactly. It's madness. And I will say, they will stop blaming the Tories, of course, at this point, but they'll blame Iran. They'll blame the war in Ukraine. They'll blame everyone but their own policy decisions. And that's where we've got to as a political culture. It's really quite frightening until someone, if Mr. Burnham wants to come up in front of the media and start answering some questions. Exactly.
Well, apparently he's doing a pooled interview at 11 o'clock. We hope to be able to get that at some point, take a few questions from the regional media and others. But this is the thing. Iran is having an impact. And the interesting thing is, of course, the Iran war impact and the Strait of Hormuz being closed and the impact on the price of oil and liquefied natural gas and numerous other projects absolutely vital for the world's economy, that hasn't really been felt because an awful lot of countries, including us, companies have been using stockpiles and the things have gone up and down, but with no end in sight of that. And Donald Trump threatening to bomb Oman, his latest threat, one of our allies, also on the other half of the Strait of Hormuz with Iran, that is probably not helping things. But the key thing is that we have been much worse hit than pretty much any other Western nation by the Strait of Hormuz being closed by the Iran conflict because of our reliance on importing vital fossil fuel energy.
Exactly. It's all down to Mr. Milliwatt, who's now in exile, in the Foreign Office, which is good news until you realise that his replacement, Miata Fambula, is even more of an eco-zealot than he is. And we've just seen the consultation close for the government to reopen the Jackdaw, oil field, at the same time as BP wanted to pull out altogether. So I don't think there's going to be any succour, for people watching at home in terms of their economic conditions, unless, of course, and this is the caveat, you work for the public sector, because also data came out today which shows that public sector workers have had over 6% increase on their pay against about 2% for private sector workers. So
really. And that really in real terms, or is that basically in real terms, so over and above inflation? But this is the thing. I mean, this is the utter madness, because we had the complaints from lots of public sector workers, didn't we, over periods of Tory rule. They say, we had our wages frozen, we had 1% rises and things, during the austerity years. We need to make up that pay. Well, they have, but the reality is, so did the private sector. The private sector had exactly the same, but also weren't having more generous pensions and didn't have job security, and a lot of them didn't get furlough and weren't just being paid to sit at home and pretend to be on a Zoom call 45 minutes every now and then. I mean, and so it's the productive private sector that is being hit.
Exactly. I mean, companies don't have the luxury of, every October going in and raiding more of your pay packet, as they do with workers and businesses. So it's a complete mess fundamentally, Julia. And I don't think there's any sensible thinking coming out of the government at the moment in order to correct this problem. I think we're going to be in for a long-term hit for our employment figures. And I'm a bit worried we're going to reach what, as you may remember, stagflation, stagnatory economic growth and high higher inflation. I think it's going to continue for a long time. That is the worst thing.
Worried. And the key thing about inflation, again, is, and I know that economists, friends of the show like Liam Halligan, have talked about this and written, I think, Sunday Telegraph a column about this, the expectation about inflation, going up. But this is, and again, we've seen, because when energy prices go up, it drives up everything, and the tax rises are driving up prices as well in the shops. And then Andy Burnham attacks supermarkets for price gouging when they clearly aren't. They're making a profit margin of 3%. That ain't price gouging. But the thing about that is inflation hits everybody. Poor, If you're poor, inflation is hitting you hardest because you are spending most of your money on necessities, and it's the necessities that go up the most. If you are middle income and everything, it will hit you just as well. If you're high income, you've got savings, any savings, it will basically eat away at those savings. And it eats away at pay. You work hard, you're on a low wage, but you get into a higher wage bracket. That's just going to eat away at any extra wages you get. It's the worst of all worlds for everybody.
Exactly. It's the worst tax. It's the invisible tax. It's really terrible. It's not just inflation, though, Julia. It's also asset devaluation, which is something that we've looked at the Adam Smith Institute quite recently. Particularly, we released our Millionaire Tracker last month. We found that we have the fewest millionaires, at any time period since 2008.
They're leaving the country?
No, it's asset devaluation mainly. It's the fact that our property bubble is the air is slowly coming out of it.
Is that necessarily a bad thing?
Well,
I'm looking at my property. I'm not planning to sell. If my property goes down in value from a notional value it had 10 years ago, long after I bought it, does that really make any difference? If it also means that, our youngsters have a chance of getting on the housing ladder.
Well, I'm not complaining personally. I don't own my own house, so I'm not complaining about it personally. But the problem we've got is that it's the way in which we collect wealth in this country, which is we're overvalued when it comes to money and property rather than in equities or stocks or shares, because that is productive capital. Whereas what we have at the moment is unproductive capital. It's bricks, mortar, and land.
Right.
So that's where the issue is. But back to the story at heart, about the employment figures, Julia. This is all just one big economic storm which is brewing up, and I don't have the confidence that Chancellor John Healey, come October 28th, is going to have the hat out the rabbit to really solve these things. I think it's going to be a long-term problem.
Or indeed that the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, has got the steel and the strength in his spine to actually do the things that are necessary to help the country get to that supposed good growth he says he wants. Maxwell Marlowe from the Adam Smith Institute, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Quick response from Tom Slater?
No, it's such a chronic problem that the government has got to deal with, both in terms of the general economic picture, also unemployment. And I think the unemployment thing is the one that's most striking, because they cannot admit that they are a large part of the problem. I mean, you can bang on about the Tory inheritance as much as you want, but the way in which you hike, if you tax jobs, there's going to be fewer jobs. It really is that simple. It
is really that mind-blowing. If any of the people running government had ever run a business, they might understand that. Anyway, we're coming up to the top of the hour. Lots more top guests. Tom Slater staying with us. Lots more of your brilliant calls as well. Give us a call on anything you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. We are trying to be the voice of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio, watching on YouTube, all the other ways of watching and listening, thank you so much for your company. If you missed anything from the show in the first hour, do go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we will be discussing that vigil in London last night for Jason Arday. Campaigners blaming a vicious media campaign for his death, demanding a public inquiry and for censorship of the media. Is that a reasonable, rational response to what has happened? Plus, Andy Burnham is expected to push a decision on 2 North Sea oil and gas projects into the autumn. Of course he is. It's Andy Burnham, because of concerns about the optics of approving new drilling during a summer of heat waves and wildfires. Well, yes, if you go around for a long time telling people that every time the sun shines and that there's a wildfire, that it's climate change, then you'll get yourself into that mess, won't you? This is a man, by the way, who in 2019 was offering succour to Extinction Rebellion after they were, blocking roads in central London and blocking airport runways and saying that they were doing a good job raising awareness of the climate change issue. Also, we're going to be discussing Angela Rayner softening planning rules for traveller sites, basically giving councils fewer ways to block them. All the British people want is for all the rules, all the laws and all of the enforcement of all rules and the laws to be the same for everyone. It's a British sense of fair play. When people ask about what are your British values, I would say queuing, saying sorry when you've done nothing wrong when someone bumps into you, and expecting fairness. I would say those are the 3 top British traits and values, and one of them really crucially is that their sense of fair play. And if I have to wait 2 years for planning to approve Miss Shed at the bottom of the garden, I think it's a bit weird if someone can set up a traveller camp anywhere they sodding well want in a green field and the planning department and the council does nothing about it because, protected groups and characteristics. So we'll talk about all of that, plenty more besides. Delighted to say Tom Slater is with me. He's editor of Spiked Online. Morning to you.
Morning.
Question I've been asking everyone today, although again always welcome to call in on anything at all, but I'd love to hear from you, particularly in the countryside, if you've had an issue with traveller sites basically popping up out of nowhere, council unable to act. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Also, disability benefits and the like, and the bus passes, love to hear your thoughts. But in particular, I do want to hear your thoughts on that I'd say extraordinary vigil at Trafalgar Square last night for Jason Arday. It was claimed there were some 30,000 people there. Probably not in those numbers. People who organise events probably over-egg how many people are there. But it was live streamed. It was followed on the news last night. Sky News and BBC and others had it, and basically claims from an extraordinary number of the speakers about who was to blame for the death of the former Cambridge professor who resigned from his job and that believed to have taken his own life on Friday. Claims even from a peer of the realm, Lord Simon Woolley, that he had been assassinated and lynched because of the colour of his skin. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this, because it seems to me that this has just got completely over the top, completely out of kilter with, well, let's face it, reality, and that this event was less about remembering someone's life and far more about a political demonstration of hate. I'm sorry, of hate and of lies against the media, against people telling the truth, and claims of racism where there have been none, and some would say almost incitement for action to be taken against it. There's a list of journalists, there's a list of media organisations that's been circulated online. I am on that list. What a surprise. Some of the extraordinary posts that have been made, criticising posts that I have made, which have been full of nothing but facts and very reasonable, I would say, probably majority opinion in this country. Some extraordinary comments. I've been called a white devil by a guest who was on the show last week, Hyundai Andres. But Tom Slater was at the vigil last night. And Tom, we're asking people to get in touch. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000, text on 87222, get in touch on X at Talk TV. A lot of you doing that as well. Calls are charged at the national rate, text cost 1, standard network rate message. Obviously, you can call in on anything else that you want to call about. You're in charge of what you want to discuss. We'll get you on air. But you were there last night, and I think you found it. You said it was felt quite sinister at times.
Yeah, I mean, it was a mix of things. On the one hand, there were people who were clearly very upset by what had taken place. How could they not? The human tragedy.
They were friends of all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. People who were taken to the podium who had been with him in his final days. So there is that kind of immediate emotional response. There's the other aspect to it, which, to be honest, it was a bit like peering into a parallel universe, because the story that we have all seen unfold in front of us in terms of the plagiarism allegations, the fabulism being exposed, the revelations that the police had been called on reporters and academics who tried to raise the alarm, all of this had been completely rewritten. What we had here was someone who had been accused of plagiarism, completely exonerated, and then still hounded until the ends of the earth, and that was all she wrote.
And the only explanation for that was
racism.
Yeah, because he was a young black man and people didn't want a black man to rise to a role of being a professor at Cambridge University.
Exactly, and Lord Woolley wasn't the only one to explicitly say that the press murdered him. He said assassinated, he then said lynched when prompted by a member of the audience who was standing just a few feet away from me. So that this language is very intense, accusatory, sinister, racialised, and it's totally untrue. It does not comport at all with what has actually happened. This is, I think, the key point. It's really important to say that. I also think it's really important for media organisations, journalists, many of us who've had our names put on lists that have been circulated with journalists asking for embarrassing information on us professionally or personally in order to get back at us.
Fill your boots, I say. Off you go. No skeletons in my closet. They're all out there.
Exactly, that's the way to do it. We've got to sort of stick up for ourselves, because we did not murder this man. We did not do anything other than expose what had happened, to discuss it. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, Julia, but the journalists did their job because the University of Cambridge didn't. They should have vetted this man better.
They shouldn't have appointed him because he wasn't qualified for the job.
And within months.
And that's not because I don't believe black people, as was claimed by someone else.
Exactly.
They don't believe that black people are... What an outrageous thing to say about people. I know I'm not racist. I've got plenty... Can you prove it? Well, I can't prove what's in my heart. I've done a lot of weird things for someone who's apparently racist. I mean, if someone accused, me or you or the editor of a national newspaper or someone wrote a comment of being a paedophile, which was not true, you would defend yourself. And yet we are seeing a lot of mainstream media trying to sort of slink back and go, let's go, we've been accused of things, and lots of people, the Julian Moore and Good Law Project, they're pushing, or the Hacked Off group, lots of people are, getting involved, calling for more controls on the media, censorship, all of these things which so many on the left want. And so they're kind of backing off. No, if people accuse you of something that you have not done, that you are not, and by the way, being called a racist, and as far as I'm concerned, someone just people go, you're a racist because you voted for Brexit. That's water off ducks, but we're all fat. Most of the population of this country is racist, apparently, because of that. You're racist because you don't think we should have open-door immigration. You're racist. It's ridiculous. They've debunked that word. But these accusations, the idea that people like me or like you or others, that we didn't want a brilliant young black man to have that job because he was black, is an outrageous, disgusting, libelous slur on what we actually believe, not only what we've said, but also what we believe in our hearts.
In current society, being accused of being a racist is basically the worst thing you can possibly be accused of.
No, that's it, other than paedophile.
Yeah, but
it's up there with it.
It's a scarlet letter that they're trying to put on people.
And they know that, the people making those accusations without any basis in truth.
And here's the thing, you take away its sting when you refuse to let it be applied incorrectly. It's really important that journalists realise this, that media organisations realise this. Yes, they're running scared of press regulation, which, again, stick up for yourself, but also you cannot allow this, what is a very important word, which has some meaning, to be hijacked in this way. And also, if anything, the really unpleasant kind of undertone to a lot of what was said last night was that Jason Arde was someone to look up to for his achievements. I mean, it's the sort of thing as if to say that he would not have achieved what he did if it wasn't for all of the shortcuts that were put in front of him. The whole thing is completely messed up.
But what did he achieve? We don't know any... I'm yet to see anything that he did that this cannot be questioned. Every claim he has made about his life, about his health, cancer, the being mute, the illiterate, every claim he has made, written a book, is untrue.
Yeah.
Has been proven to be. Claims even about, they claim to have suffered. Again, that he'd suffered a racist attack by a knife man, that a pig's head was sent to his parents' home. There'd been a police investigation. Police said there's no police investigation. The butcher which he claimed said that pig's head people hadn't sold a pig's head to anybody. I mean, these things where there was no CCTV, despite there being CCTV all over where he claimed a knife man that accosted him. None of it happened.
And also those claims, they were exposed by The Guardian. If you look at his memoir, The Atlantic, a liberal left outlet in America, did most of the heavy lifting on that particular claim. The New York Times in the past few days put out a devastating, I think it's fair to say, summary.
Went full Black Lives Matter, full taking the knee,
just laying out the
woke,
facts. This was
everything.
Not a right-wing reactionary lynching. And it's one of those things where, of course, we should also return to the human tragedy in the midst of this, the family tragedy in the midst of this, absolutely. But we are not the ones trying to politicise this in the wake of his death. What's happened is there are some people who have got an axe to grind, whether that's their apocalyptic vision of where British race relations is at, or whether it's their pre-existing agenda to regulate the press. And I hate to say it, they are using a suicide as a soapbox. We are not the ones who are turning this what should be a horrific family tragedy, which people should be able to give them the space to grieve and so on, and trying to make political capital out of it.
I've had something like 3 million views on a tweet that I wrote and put on X on Saturday evening. Best part of 24 hours after we found out about Jason Arday's death. And I didn't post on Friday night, didn't post on Saturday daytime. I waited until I had read through the most extraordinary raft of claims that it was the media, the racist media that killed him, and the politicising by people claiming to be not just supporters of Jason Arday and believers of his life, but also friends. And colleagues, and I just thought it was simply too outrageous to let go, and that was what I responded to. I was then called a ghoul. I mean, but it was interesting. Benedict Spence, friend of this parish, will be on the show tomorrow. Day 4, he's written today. Day 4 of the people who insist you shouldn't politicise someone's death. Politicising someone's death. That's what's going on. Now, I was going to play you a clip. Now, I played you earlier a clip. I do want you to pay close attention to this. Lord Woolley, Simon Woolley, he's a very leading figure in a lot of this, in the campaigning for Jason Arday. And one of the signatories to that Good Lord Project petition about basically that it was racism that was motivated against Jason Arday in his life. 17,000 of the great and the good signed that. I'm going to play you a clip of what Lord Woolley said last night, and you were just a few feet away, Tom Slater. I'm then going to play you Press Association, who disperse these clips to the media once they're played. This is a clip of what Lord Woolley actually said that went out live on Sky News. OK, so watch and listen to this.
This is tough for me, as it's tough for all of you and the hundreds and thousands of people in the UK and around the world who are appalled by the public assassination of Jason Arday. The lynching. The lynching.
Assassination, lynching, extraordinary language. Now, when I saw this clip online, and I said to my team, can we please have a clip of that, because I think it's so shocking. And the fact that also, he's not another. He's not one of the usual suspect Labour MPs who just looking for a fight at all times. He's a peer of the realm. I mean, it's just quite extraordinary. He sits in the House of Lords, for goodness sake. And we looked for that clip, couldn't find it anyway. Just couldn't find it anywhere until we found that live feed from Sky. And the reason why is because Press Association have we've got about a 4-minute clip of that speech, and that is what has gone out, and this is where media organisations get their clips, because there's a central agency that will pull this stuff together. You can go, oh, great, I can get it from there. This is what they did with the clip. See if you can see where it's been edited and what's missing.
This is tough for me, as it's tough for all of you and the hundreds and thousands of people in the UK and around the world who are appalled. I want to change the world.
After he said the word appalled, we've heard that first clip. The live feed showed him saying, appalled by the public assassination of Jason Arday, the lynching. That was cut in the clip that was given out to media who are appalled, I want to change the world. I'm sorry. Why has a news organisation cut very, very significant words from a publicly, broadcast speech? What would be the motive for that, Tom Slater?
I think especially because there is so much scrutiny these days of people in politics, certain people in politics, rhetoric. Nigel Farage as to so much as passed wind after some sort of quite controversial moment, and he's leapt upon for the way in which he's talked about it, politicised it. We all remember the cold rage comments in the wake of Henry Novak's murder. And yet, inflammatory rhetoric of this kind is not given the same treatment. If anything, the fact that it's been quietly edited, I don't know the reasons for it, but one might speculate that it's because they realise that it's a bad look, that on some level they realise that this is giving us a kind of edge to this vigil, which was kind of morphed into a demonstration at points, that maybe wouldn't cast it in the best of lights. I mean, that was one of the sort of take-home messages from this, was that the mood there was, on the one hand, as we've been talking about so far, was obviously a kind of emotional outpouring, an understandable emotional outpouring, a very just emotional outpouring at people who knew Jason Ardale, people who just might have read about this story and thought, what a horrible end to a still young life. But there was this other, quite sinister dimension to it, which was not only trying to racialise what was, in the end, a tragic suicide, turning it into an assassination, turning it into a lynching, but also very much saying that the media had blood on their hands when all that people had done was report the truth. If reporting the truth is tantamount to murder, then you cannot have a free press. I don't know how anyone can't wrap their heads around it.
I think that's the plan. Look, let's talk about other things. I do want to hear your thoughts. I mean, I find that very strange. I'd love Press Association to tell us why you would cut the most newsworthy bit of a speech from your feed. I find very strange. I'd love to know the reason for that. If you want to call in Press Association, please do. 0344 499 1000. Thomas Slater, let's also talk about small matters of, claims about climate change, net zero, costs to the economy. We talked about the economy a little bit earlier with Adam Smith Institute, but we had Richard Tice yesterday. He's on the front page of the Mirror and the Guardian. I'm sure he's enjoying that. Claimed that it was insulting for him, make comments about people shouldn't be moaning about the heat wave. We should celebrate it. We should enjoy drinking English sparkling wine. If we've got warmer weather, we're more likely to have nicer wine. I have to say, English sparkling wine wins taste tests, all the top experts, over a lot of, very good quality French champagne, I like to point out. Lots of good ones. Feel free to send them into the show anytime, obviously. I'm joking. No, feel free. But this comes at the time when we've got, we had that wildfire phone alert that scared the living daylights out of us on Friday. I know people, who were driving at that time who were absolutely terrified and almost lost control of the car. We've got Andy Burnham apparently looking at basically agreeing to these oil and gas fields which have already been given licences, but there was an appeal because, but climate change appeal. And that's what it's just a climate change appeal for the Rosebank oil field and the Jackdaw gas field to go ahead. But apparently he's going to kick it into the long grass, well, certainly for a few more weeks, because he doesn't want to announce it while we're all sitting there going, I haven't had a good night's sleep for months, it's been too hot and there are wildfires on the telly and it's all climate change. Even though wildfires there's fewer wildfires this year than last year, which is weird because it's a hot and summer. Who knew? But we've got all of that going on at the same time. What do you make of all of those stories?
Well, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, Richard Tice seems to have sort of put his foot in it or upset a fair amount of people in the press with this particular comment.
He was probably being a little bit too glib.
Yeah, and, maybe I think sometimes there's too much scrutiny on certain politicians. They're just sort of shooting from the hip and trying to make light of certain situations. And it wouldn't have exploded like it has if it wasn't for the fact there is this mania around the issue of climate change. I mean, David Wooding was in here earlier pointing out that you actually need a fair amount of rain if you want decent wine to be produced in this country. But at the same time, this is something that Matt Ridley often points out. Actually, the rise in carbon dioxide has led to a tremendous greening across the
more food is being produced than ever before. This is a good thing, I think.
Exactly. You're not allowed to mention it because it might imply that maybe there's some pluses as well as some negatives to the way in which
I would say largely definitely more pluses, but there we are.
But it's just endless, isn't it? It's just a kind of hysteria that people are willing to.
And let's talk about these traveller sites, because Angela Rayner making these changes, which are basically going to pave the way for more traveller sites. I mean, most people live in the country, so probably argue there's already too many, but Housing Secretary is back in her job. Obviously, she's removed two key rules that councils and residents have used to oppose unauthorised traveller camps. She made the changes and update England's planning rules on Monday. And basically more development of the green belt. That I support easing planning rules and around the green, 100%. But basically, under previous rules, councils consider potential environmental damage caused by unauthorised encampments when they assess applications, and also that sites should only be approved if they provide a settled base that limits the need for long-distance travelling. But those requirements are removed. Basically, I mean, local councils aren't really going to be able to oppose traveller sites. There's going to be a free-for-all. And the thing that people get upset about is people just turning up onto other people's land and then the police don't act, make it a civil issue. Someone camps on your land, if you own land and, you know, in the countryside, I think you should absolutely have the right to the police to turn up the next day to remove them. Same with someone squatting in your home. I find it extraordinary this is dealt with as a civil matter. It ain't a civil matter. But even if people buy land, but it hasn't got permitted development, it hasn't got... Why should the rules be different for one group, not everyone else? No,
it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And we all know why these rules have been tweaked and to remove what are the only... I think it's because there is a slight sensitivity around this issue.
Is there a big contingent of Labour voters and Labour MPs going, genuinely, you know what we really need to do? We need to have more traveller sites popping up which aren't authorised.
You just need to apply the rules evenly. I mean, that is the answer to so many of these different problems, is just do it without fear or favour, do it even if it might have a disproportionate impact on certain groups because they tend to carry on in a certain way. Just
it only has a disproportionate impact on people who don't abide by the rules of everyone else.
It's really simple, and it's one of those things as well, which is kind of will be really frustrating, is that as various rural communities, not exclusively, will know that this can be a really kind of difficult problem to deal with for precisely the reasons that you say, whether it's treated as a civil matter or now, even when you have situations where a portion of land is purchased and then just developed very quickly, often overnight, you know, the cement goes down.
I don't understand. I mean, again,
how is that allowed to happen?
I don't claim to know much about, you know, the traveller culture. But again, if someone's culture is that we move around a lot, well, then why are you putting down cement and setting up homes if that's good? I just don't think because someone says, well, this is my culture and it should be protected. I know these are protected groups, the same, you know. I don't think there should be any protected groups, by the way. But I just think, again, everyone should be treated the same. I want people not penalised because of their culture.
Yeah.
However, if your culture is basically a problem for everybody else. I mean, if there was this isn't a religious group, but if there were a religious group or an ethnic minority group who said our culture involves, you know, skinning cats alive. If there was just any group at all, you know, some Christian evangelist group or whatever, this is what our culture is and we want to be able to do it. Well, no, that's against the law, and it's against the law for everyone to do that because it's cruelty if you don't do that. The rules need to be the same for everyone on everything.
Yeah.
That's how the law is supposed to work.
It really is that simple.
It's really... yeah. I'm finding myself thinking, is there another argument here? No, there really isn't.
No, completely. And I have no idea why they thought this would be anything other than deeply unpopular, particularly in the communities.
Do you know what they're going to do? They're going to allow it to happen, and the people get very upset. And do you know what they're then going to do? They're going to backtrack on it, or they're not because they haven't got lady Labour MPs in rural areas where this is happening.
They've got a lot more than they used to. Yeah. That was the thing, because of last time, how much the Tory vote collapsed. You'd be surprised. There's a fair few kind of
good point.
Labour rural MPs who are clinging on to those seats by not very big margins. Things like this could easily
absolutely fascinating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything and everything we are talking about. There's something we're not talking about you think we should be talking about, give us a call as well, 0344 499 1000. I'm going to get some of your messages and also we're going to get to your calls coming in up next. This is Talk.
£1 donation problem, which kind of triggered this whole by-election. Is that an issue for you?
No. No, I accept that most politicians are in it at the end of the day for the 100,000 a year that they get, and so everybody's in it for money. And if it was for security, and let's face it, look at Anne Widdecombe. She could have done with 5 million, couldn't she, for security? She's dead. And so, no, I don't. I think he was entitled to accept it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back. 11:27 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. Spike is on the line in Hampshire. Hello, Spike. What do you want to talk about?
Good morning, Julia, and Tom, I believe.
You correctly believe that.
Well, I got something right today. Anyway, this hard-day vigil last night, I can't understand why they're holding a vigil for some guy who lied and cheated his way with a backstory that the British Got Talent would be proud of, to a professorship. And then he couldn't handle when he was found out. So why are they holding a vigil for this guy who just did that?
I mean, I can understand why people who were his loved ones would want to hold a private vigil for him. But again, I'm with you. I find it very strange that he is being held up as some sort of hero. I think it's all just very, very, very sad.
Yeah, it's almost like they're trying to create a Black Lives Matter in England over a death of a coloured person. That's all I can say. And it's everyone behind this seems to have an agenda. But also what all this kerfuffle is doing is distracting people from the people in Cambridge who appointed this guy.
Yeah.
So all the time this is going on, they're forgetting about who actually appointed him.
Yeah, absolutely. And they, they have an awful lot to answer. And again, the way they treated people who questioned their decision-making, which was appalling. I mean, it seems to me that everyone involved in the appointment should be sacked on the spot, personally, but there we are. I have a funny feeling their inquiry is going to take quite some time, should it not? Spike, thank you for that. Dave is in London. Dave, what do you want to say?
Oh, hi, Julia.
Hi.
Yep, very tragic event, obviously, for this guy and particularly his family and friends. But I think, having listened to yours and Tom's kind of debate on it at the start of the show, I think you kind of came out with the view, why doesn't the press stand up for itself? And then you and Tom spent the best part of 10 minutes. I don't know what you were trying. I don't know who you were trying to convince, yourselves, your audience, but you spent 10 minutes demonstrating why the press doesn't stand up for itself. Because, I don't know, you went on about Brexit, BLM, Israel, climate change deniers, the fact that you get attacked. If you were asked to walk from the embankment to the South Bank, you'd probably go via Westminster Bridge. You went round such a long, great, big... So you're not convinced yourselves. And then you just realised... Well, you're kind of not, Julia.
We talked and then we went on to talk about the attacks on journalists and what people are called and the names and the attempts to smear journalists. But that was a side alley after a main conversation.
Yeah, but this is the whole point.
Yeah.
It's all irrelevant. You need to take a leaf out of the Megyn Kelly, Matt Walsh type things. Go home and watch them on YouTube and see how they deal with it. Yeah. Because you've also
I can't understand a word of this.
You've also now just shown the fact that the guy, Lord Woolley, who likened it to a lynching, the press has already taken that out. And let me give you an issue about lynching. You're now going to go back to Jussie Smollett, if you remember him from 3 or 4 years ago, who actually hoaxed people that he had been subject to a lynching. In fact, when they interviewed him as the police, he still had a rope round his neck. The hoax was that.
Yeah.
Now, this is essentially a hoax from this professor as well. It's in that same type of category. And by the way, good luck to the guy. If I could come up with a hoax like that, I'd do it tomorrow morning.
But he is now dead.
So in a way, you've now got a guy that's used the term lynching. So you should have started off in a way, instead of going round and round and round trying to convince yourself or your audience. I'm not sure who you're trying to convince.
I'm not trying to convince anybody. I know exactly what I think. So does Tom. And we were just explaining why we were unhappy with the way this is being, the accusations that are being made, but also the media not defending itself. I think that was very clear.
What you have to remember is the left love a martyr.
Yes.
They cling on to a martyr, so they will make this into a martyr because that's what the left does. So this is almost perfect, in inverted commas, for them. But you guys should just go back and focus now and put on your headline, Lord Woolley uses the term lynching, and go after him. Double down and go after him.
I don't want to go after anybody. I just want to... I just find it extraordinary that people would make such a blatantly untrue claim and use such intemperate language, but at the same time they'll accuse people like me or Tom or others of intemperate language when we've just simply literally used facts. Look, I think we're going to have to agree and disagree, Dave, if that's okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to get to some texts as well. William says assassinated and lynched, horrible, dangerous and disingenuous language to use. Spencer says, remember the pylon Rachel Reeves had when she was caught lying on her CV? I remember pictures of her on the moon, the Battle of Trafalgar, etc. Was that racism? Oh, it was fun, though, wasn't it? Mark said Jason Arde lied and cheated his way into a position he did not deserve to be in. This was enabled by people who were so desperate for a DEI poster boy, they brushed aside any doubts about him. He killed himself, not anybody else. So whilst this is tragic, it's 100% on him. Neil says, claims that 30,000 were at the vigil. 30,000 people celebrating the death of a poor guy who was a victim of their own DEI policies. Disgusting. Bill says they have a serious problem with the word accountability. It's always someone else's fault. Good God, says Stevie, people on the left are mentalists, every single one. Ethan says he stole someone else's work. He lied about his academic experience. He stole a job that should have gone to someone deserving. He was a lousy teacher. He was a racist, telling a student about her white privilege. He got caught out. None of these merit a death sentence, though. But it was something that he carried out rather than other people, you could say. The racists, says Les, are the ones who call everyone who doesn't agree with them racist, with the unfortunate effect that the word is losing its power. 11:34 is the time. Well, I mean, again, I'm meant to talk about more other topics. Again, you get to choose what you want to call in about. We're going to talk to Andrew Tettenborn, who's a writer and an academic, about the issue over the academic issue on this and indeed the media. We'll talk to him up next. Also going to be talking about the North Sea oil field. Are we going to actually see a decision from Andy Burnham anytime soon? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:36 is the time. Oh, just some breaking news. Tim Montgomery, a friend of this parish, I have to say. He was a very high-profile Conservative, used to, of course, run, Conservative Home website. He's defected, very high-profile, to Reform UK. He's reportedly a party board member. He's been suspended, according to the Guido Fawkes website, from the Reform Party for repeated public criticism of, in particular, Home Affairs spokesman Zia Youssef. Very interesting. So, Tim, if you're around, want to come on the show, give us a call. Right now, let's talk more about this Jason Arde vigil and the aftermath and implications for not just the media, as we've been talking about, but actually also for Cambridge University and academia itself, with Andrew Tettenborn. He is a writer and academic and joins us now. Very good morning to you, Andrew.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you, George. Look, we've focused a lot on what's been going on in terms of the vigil, a lot of the reaction online and all that. But let's focus on, and it's a point actually one of my last callers made, that actually, very little, a lot of folks are, it's the media's fault, lynching and horrific language like that. But somehow Cambridge University, people are kind of forgetting when, of course, it was Cambridge University that chose to appoint Jason O'Day, chose to, support him and in the face of a huge number of really well-based claims that actually he was not the person that they said they thought he was, but also that actually the credentials he had when he applied for the job simply were not up to scratch for anyone expecting him to be a professor at Cambridge.
The academic establishment needs to have its feet held very firmly to the fire here. Partly, of course, it's Glasgow who first appointed him to a chair, and I must admit I'd like to know what due diligence they showed. But I think the people who really do have questions to answer are Cambridge University, who essentially set this man up to fail. Now, one point, of course, is that Cambridge supposedly is the brightest and the best. And for
as an Oxford grad, are they?
That's why I said supposedly. I'm a Cambridge person myself. But no, they set up a committee of 7 of apparently the cleverest people in the subject, presumably meant to supply judgment and wisdom in appointing this person. What strikes me as very interesting is that not one of those people seems to have had the simple interest in going back to read some of this person's writings.
Yeah.
If they did, it's very odd that they didn't realize that they were actually dreadful. Now, there's something very seriously wrong there.
Yeah, I mean that is the issue. And again, I've seen some of the excerpts and the intro, I think, to one of the apologies of Jason O'Day's one of his pieces. It's incomprehensible gobbledygook nonsense and
it's cross between Teen Vogue and Citizen Smith.
Yeah.
At times, for those listeners who remember Citizen Smith.
Yeah.
What worries me, actually, is what Cambridge hasn't said, because it said we are going to look at all our procedures for appointment. The trouble is, this wasn't a failure of process. This was a failure of people. It comes back to what I said earlier. Of the 6 or 7 supposedly top-rank people who are involved in this appointment, none of them actually took the basic steps to make sure that this person was the right appointee, or if they did, they nevertheless appointed him knowing that he wasn't.
And that's the thing, isn't it?
Cambridge needs to make sure that they cure that problem. And this
is one of the key issues, because while we got accusations, the media went after him, and there was a story because he was like the argument. And a point I made in an article I wrote last week, or a couple of weeks ago, before he'd resigned, I think, just after he'd resigned, but obviously before his death, was that actually we wouldn't have known about him, and he wouldn't have been lauded if he hadn't been black, because he was fated, because he was the youngest black professor. This was a big deal. This was a matter of pride for Cambridge University, worried about being thought of as too male, too pale, too stale, and that this was a good thing. But the key thing is, as Tom Slater, my guest in the studio, has pointed out, that actually of the people shortlisted for this role, interestingly, 2 of them were women of colour.
I would love to read what they'd written, I must admit.
Well, indeed. But the key thing is that other people appointed to professorships at this level, this grade at Cambridge University, it would be typical that they had extensive publications, extensive research grants, number of books, blah, blah, blah. He didn't have any of this. Even his lies didn't go that far. And so there's this idea that on what basis did he have any credentials other than apparently being a DEI hire, hired for the wrong reasons, but also that he had this amazing backstory about having been a mute and having been illiterate until he was 18 and things like that.
Although it's absolutely clear this person was appointed for the wrong reason, and that this has blown up entirely in Cambridge's face. And Cambridge needs to note that and make sure it never happens again.
But it will happen again, because the people,
probably will.
the people who made the appointment, they will not think that they've given this. All the attention is now on the media's fault for pointing it out. The Emperor has no clothes on. They're going to carry on sending the Emperor out in the nude, aren't they?
Oh, Cambridge is. What was interesting, for example, was another head of department in Cambridge who sent an official note to his students saying, I feel your pain. I will be at the vigil for Jason R. Day tomorrow if you wish to join me there. That was the person who runs the history faculty in Cambridge. But certainly there is this effort to divert attention onto the press, because actually the one institution that has come well out of this is the media. And it's the one institution that needs protecting against the attacks that are being made on it.
And, yeah. I would agree with you on this, but I do want to stick on, because we talked a lot about the media. I do want to stick with the issue of academia, because British universities, we have some of the best universities in the world, and Oxford and Cambridge are considered to be two of the very best in the world. The reputations of our universities is, like American universities, we saw what happened with Harvard and other leading Ivy League universities in America, absolutely destroyed, utterly destroyed by the DEI hiring and the racialising of their entry, their victory quotas for entry, and the lowering of standards for children from certain ethnic minorities to apply. I think really, really shocking stuff. But I think a lot of this is just exposed to a lot of people how bad things are in our universities. We know that they hounded, people who voted for Brexit. We've had polls of academics who voted Remain, who would not even be willing to sit next to someone at lunch who had voted for Brexit. There was actually a poll about that. They think that, you're transphobic if you don't think that men can become women, that you are racist if you didn't support Black Lives Matter and take the knee and things like that. We are in a territory where we have got the people who are supposed to be in charge of our ideas and research and scholarship and facts don't seem to care about any of those things.
You're quite right, Julia. What also Cambridge doesn't realise is that trying to suck up to people and saying, we will make life easier for you, we will show our credentials in DEI, is really what the good students don't want. If you want to get seriously brilliant international students, and I have a little bit of experience of this, what you want to do is cultivate a reputation of a university that takes no prisoners, that believes in tough love, and doesn't make concession to any students.
But high standards.
Then people will apply, knowing that if you give them a degree, they damn well deserved it.
Yeah. That's the thing. Well, meritocracy, we talk about this in lots of different areas of the show today. It's about being based on merit. Do you believe, now, I'm asking you, with all due respect, a white gentleman, do you believe that there are people in academia who actively don't want there to be successful black people among their ranks?
I don't think they'd put it that way. I think there are people in academia who quietly think that black people always need a leg up because there is some form of disadvantage built into them.
Built into them or into their background?
What the argument will be, Britain is a structurally racist society.
Oh, I see what you mean, right.
People cannot avoid starting out on the back foot. Therefore, we must give them some particular advantage.
Right.
Now, if anything is insulting to people who are not white, that is. And unfortunately, in my view, it's a very common belief, whether conscious or unconscious, among far too many very senior people in universities.
Right, very, very interesting. Andrew Tenenbaum, writer and academic, thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. Tom Slater, do you want to come back in on that?
I think it's another reminder of the quite clearly racist ideology which has taken over institutions like Cambridge and large parts of the media and so on, which is precisely this sort of bigotry of low expectations, this idea that ethnic minority academics, students, what have you, are incapable of achieving on their own and therefore need a leg up, and not even a leg up, actually need the standards to be lowered. I mean, it's one thing to say that certain schemes need to be put in place, and I think most people would support, actually, certainly on the level of social class and disadvantage, more routes into better educational institutions,
state schools and
what have you.
Goodness me, absolutely.
And, you know, universities, elite universities, pairing with, say, inner-city schools that are producing high-quality, diverse, if you want to use that phrase, intake, and making sure that they have that cultural capital and that guidance to get them to reach the very top. No one would say boo about it. This agenda is totally different. It's about saying the standards need to be lowered for particular individuals, because how otherwise could they possibly achieve?
And again,
it's
you know,
racist,
the ideal guest on that would be Catherine Burble Singh of the Michaela School, which once again has achieved the sort of number of A grades and A stars and places at Oxbridge, which, you know, Eton would be jealous of because no prisoners taken, no excuses given, proper teaching, proper standards expected, children encouraged, and what a surprise, children from often very impoverished backgrounds, often immigrant backgrounds, are doing really, really well. All credit to you, Catherine Burble Singh. But instead, she is denounced, as opposed to praised for doing the right thing. 11:48 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Give us a call 0244 499 1000. Love to hear your thoughts on what my next guest is going to tell us. Chris Morrison from the Daily Sceptic. We're going to be talking about Andy Burnham's and that North Sea oil decision and that new hosepipe ban beginning. Of course it is. Richard Tice getting it in the ear for comments about England. Stop moaning about the climate change. Enjoy English sparkling wine. We'll talk about all of that up next. This is Talk.
£5 million donation problem, which kind of triggered this whole by-election. Is that an issue for you?
No, I accept that most politicians are in it at the end of the day for the 100,000 a year that they get, and so everybody's in it for money. And if it was for security, and let's face it, look at Anne Widdecombe. She could have done with 5 million, couldn't she, for security? She's dead. And so, no, I don't. I think he was entitled to accept it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
11:50 is the time. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk about, net zero, climate change, North Sea, you name it, with Chris Morrison. He's environment editor at the Daily Sceptic and joins us now. Very good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Well, lots of reports in the last couple of days that Andy Burnham was minded, that's the word, minded to look at approving the North Sea oil and gas decisions that we've been hearing so much about, Rosebank and Jackdaw. But that actually, now we're told, well, they're probably more likely to be pushed into September because, of course, he doesn't want to approve these licences, which have already been approved, of course, by the Tories, and therefore not a breach of the Labour manifesto, saying they wouldn't approve any new licences, but they've been an appeal but climate change appeal by the eco-warriors. But basically, they go ahead with it. But because we've got wildfires and we've been really hot and haven't slept very well, he doesn't want to announce it yet. But are you hopeful that we will actually get approval for those sites to go ahead?
I suspect we will, because we're in deep trouble if we don't. But I don't think anybody knows what Burnham thinks. I wish I had better political
sources. Do you think he knows?
I was just about to make that point. I wish I had better political sources, but I suspect he doesn't know, and neither does Mayata Fambula. They're pushing it back, aren't they? And until they don't want to do it during this summer, because of course the Sandwich Board, people like Sandwich Board Stanley, as I call him, aka Tim Stanley of the Telegraph, and Hugo Rifkin, have been doing the old look out of the window trope, as if that explains complex atmospheric science.
It is quite bizarre, isn't it? The difference between climate change and also weather changing. And we have had a very hot summer. We've had a number of very hot summers. And a lot of people go, oh, well, it is climate change, but I mean, climate's over 30 years, and we are seeing slight warming of the planet. We've been seeing that for quite a long time, but that doesn't mean because we get a few fires, and it's not more than last year, by the way, and a hot summer, that it's climate change related.
Yes, the problem with the look out of the window trope is I look out a bit further. I look out to Greenland, where of course, as we all know, the ice sheet is about to get unhinged and anytime soon will be arriving in your front parlour. Yes. If you actually look at this year, it's probably going to be in net balance. There's going to be no melt on Greenland. If you look at the coral on the Great Barrier Reef, the bellwether on the huge reef down there, it's at 5 years of record cover. So
it's weird, isn't it? Because correct me if I'm wrong, have they been leading stories on the BBC website lately?
In fact, I can tell you there has been no coverage in The Guardian. Last year, of course, there was bleaching, and they didn't stop. No, they gaslight us. They just produce. They don't actually report science. They just report a narrative that.
And the things you've just said, aren't you sort of making it up? These are proper scientific researched reports by credentialed people who know what they're doing.
Yes, yeah. The Gulf Stream is the same strength as it was before. Wildfires in North America are at a quarter of the level last century. I don't make that up. It all comes from science work. Look at the data.
Yeah.
When people say, sorry?
People don't look at the data, Chris. That's the trouble.
No. Well, if they do, they ignore it, or they look at the data that they want to, or they cherry pick and this sort of thing. And you're quite right. The weather and climate thing is one of the worst things they do, because they simply cherry pick weather, whereas you can only really tell a trend of climate over, as you say, a long, long period.
Well, climate literally means over 30 years. But the interesting thing is, I mean, as I've always said, if it had rained all summer, that would have been climate change too.
Yes, of course. Yeah. It would have been drought. It would have been flooding, and because they go on flooding in the winter, of course. The Met Office tries to have it both ways. It produces these ridiculous suggestions that it's going to be 5 degrees warmer in the summer, and we're going to have less rainfall. Less rainfall in the summer, and more rainfall in the winter. So they get both higher temperatures and drought all in one go. Ka-ching! You know, I mean, it's so obvious what they're doing.
Well, do you agree with Richard Tice? He was reforms of his deputy leader. He's on the front page of the Mirror today, I think the Guardian as well. Basically, you know, he's being criticised for. I mean, it's a little bit of a Marie Antoinette moment. Shouldn't moan about the weather. That we should be celebrating and drinking more English sparkling wine because we'll be able to grow more in more vineyards.
Yes, I know naughty old Richard's been triggering the Mirror, although that probably isn't very difficult. Let them drink rosé, but of course the thing about Richard is that he of course used to do the Sunday show on Talk, and I used to come in. And the thing about Richard is he's very interested in the science, unlike a lot of politicians. And we used to chat a lot about the things I've just discussed with you, the science. He was genuinely interested, and he remains genuinely interested to this day. So what he's itemising there, of course, is there has been warming. There's been a small amount of warming from the Little Ice Age, which when, as we know, the Thames froze in the 18th century. There has been a little extra warming, and that means that grapes can now be grown a little bit further north. Now, if we go back to Roman periods, and I'm sure Richard sort of knows this, they grew grapes up to York, I think, and
not just in Kent, yeah.
Yes, that's right. In Greenland, during the medieval warming period, it was called Greenland by the Vikings because they grew stuff there, which they were unable to do when the weather got a bit chilly. And these things are cyclical. And so what Richard is pointing out is that, yes, the climate has changed marginally. There's been a little bit of warming. We don't quite know how much, partly because the measurements are not wholly accurate. They pick up a lot of urban heat corruption. But the weather, it's probably moved a degree or so, maybe 1 degree centigrade, from a very low base.
But that's not the same as it being sort of 10 degrees higher than we're used to.
No. But
that's
in fact,
weather.
Yes, that's just individual. And the reason that we look at climate change, which is a statistical construct, the reason we look at it on a long-term period is we ignore the outliers. We ignor the sort of ups and the highs and the lows.
But also we talk about all summer I've heard since records began, but those records, a lot of them, some of them actually only a few decades. So most sort of that might go back to the late 1880s, might they? But we had quite a lot of time before then.
Yes, yeah. They're talking about accurate, say, temperature measurements. In fact, there's a fascinating new open source database. England in the Little Ice Age. Sorry, extreme weather in England in the Little Ice Age, 1500 to 1700, that I've just started examining. And the summer of 1650. Well, I mean, Georges Monbiot could have written it up. No rain for 4 months. The fields were parched. The cattle were dying. People had never seen anything like it. All this sort of thing. And you know. This was during the Little Ice Age. We've always had a lot of weather.
And that was long before the Industrial Revolution, which, by the way, has delivered far greater benefits than any negativity of even if it were the cause of a 1% or 1.5% degree change. We've got a load of hosepipe bans. Here we get more hosepipe bans beginning. I'm very excited. There was some rain yesterday in my garden. My grass might, maybe, possibly survive the summer. But it is bizarre, isn't it? The really, really simple solution to all of this is we're an island nation surrounded by water. We've got huge amounts of rainfall pretty much every year. We don't have enough reservoirs for the number of people who live here, and so we run out of water.
Yes, well, we don't have enough reservoirs. We haven't built any for 30 years, as we know.
I think actually it's about 50.
yeah, no doubt. But we do have a very rainy climate, and so we do get these periods of drought, which we've seen many times in the past. And you can be guaranteed that since Lou Haig, our exciting new Deputy Prime Minister, who sort of sounds the alarm whenever there are wildfires going on, you can be guaranteed that when she's on the job, it'll start raining from now till St. Stephen's Day.
Well, again, this is why I've not got aircon yet. I'm going to give in because I've got to have to now.
Yes.
I barely slept for the last 5 weeks. But I know as soon as I buy it, we're going to have such miserable wet summers and winters the moment I buy it. So that's what put me off. Chris Morrison, great to talk to you. Voice of Reason, their environment editor at the Daily Sceptic. Thank you very much. Come on again soon. Tom Slater?
Well, hopefully we are going to get a bit more common sense on these fronts.
When?
Even Andy Burnham has at least had to pretend. This is a good thing. In the same way that the Labour Party at least now has to pretend it cares about migration, it also now has to pretend that it cares about the North Sea. Not to say that much
the cost of living.
Not that much will come of that, but it's a small crumb of progress. I'm holding on to.
As we know, net zero was never going to survive contact with reality. Contact with reality has now happened, and it ain't going to survive. But it's going to be a long route back because the lunatics who don't care about facts are going to carry on fighting. Greta, if you're watching, do come on anytime. So much more to talk about. Lord Redwood up next. Lots more top guests. Your calls as well. Give us a call. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 2 minutes past midday is the time. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio, watching on YouTube, all the other ways of listening and watching, great to have your company. As always, if you've just tuned into the show, as always, we're going to have words. But you can go to my YouTube page, catch it all up. The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, you never have to miss a thing. Coming up, we're going to be discussing Housing Secretary Angela Rayner softening planning rules for traveller sites, giving councils fewer ways to block them. That vigil in London last night for Jason Ardern. A campaign is blaming a vicious media campaign against him for his death, demanding a public inquiry, censorship of the media, and some extraordinary language from even the likes of peers of the realm. Lord Salmon Woolley, where he accused basically Jason Ardern being the victim of a public assassination, a lynching, he used that term. We're also going to talk about the small matter of our national security, because Russia has threatened Britain, saying it will pay for providing Ukraine with drones used to strike Russian territory. And also, children are becoming intoxicated by extremism on social media. This is what the Children's Commissioner, Rachel D'Souza, has been warning, calling for tighter restrictions for under-18s online. We hear those calls all the time, don't we? But also, so we are seeing a major new court case against the biggest social media companies, including Meta, who own virtually everything in the United States. We'll talk about all of that with the tech journalist. All that coming up. Delighted to say, joining me today is editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Afternoon to you. Look, we talked an awful lot about the Jason Ardern case. I do want people to call in on anything you want to talk to us about, as you know. But we had been speaking to you particularly about that vigil last night. We're told, tens of thousands of people. 30,000 was what the people said. You were there, Tom Slater, probably one there. But that's kind of by the by. It was what was said there. But people talking about him being assassinated, him being lynched, talking about, there's this language about a vicious media campaign and calling for censorship of the media and journalists being named for basically doing their job. I think it's all very sinister. I want to know your reaction to all of it. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Lots of people getting in touch on lots of these topics. But let's talk right now about that universal credit figure that we had a little bit earlier, just before we go to my guest booked for this next slot. But these latest figures came out today about, unemployment. We're still at 4.9%, so, basically 5% unemployment. That is actually low by a lot of European standards. Sort of number we were looking at going higher than we thought during lockdown, but furlough obviously tackled a lot of that. But we are seeing that staying. But the crucial figures that have come out today that are really, really worrying is not only are there fewer vacancies, a huge number of fewer vacancies than there have been in probably, I think, in the last best part of 12 years, but also the number of benefit claimants, the number of universal credit claimants in Britain has skyrocketed yet again. A record high of 8.4 million people claiming universal credit. And everyone say, well, you can have it in work. Most people aren't in work who are claiming universal credit. If they're in work, they're working part-time. One person in the household's working part-time. A shocking thing that the figure is up 700,000 from the same time last year. The Tories can quite rightly blame quite a lot of the things they're dealing with on Tory decisions, prison overcrowding, things like that. 2 years in, becomes less convincing. You've got time to get stuff done. But, like dealing with the boats, like things like that. But if under your government for the last year, you've been in power for a year before then, you've seen 700,000 more people claiming benefits, that's on you as a government, isn't it?
No, absolutely. This is something that they can't just blame away on the previous Conservative government, and even if a large part of this is failure to reform the system in such a way that would guard against these kind of sky-high figures, then they've had time to do it. I mean, the message that's been coming out of the Labour government originally was that they recognised that this was a problem. They were just going to do it in a slightly more cautious and caring fashion. Obviously, they've been... Anything where welfare reform is concerned becomes very difficult to get through the Labour backbenchers, and I think that's become even more difficult now. Those backbenchers feel that they've basically been rewarded for their treachery by a more sort of soft left flavour leader in the form of Andy Burnham. So his ability to really get a grip on this, I think, is going to be even more diminished, not least because part of the reason that the Parliamentary Labour Party got so upset with Keir Starmer was that they felt he wasn't doing things that were sort of laboury enough, which in their minds now means vast numbers of people in the country being put out to pasture rather than having jobs and meaningful employment.
As if
That's
in
what
any
the
way
Labour Party
that is good for
now
people
means.
or moral. It's utterly bizarre, isn't it? Utterly bizarre. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. I would love to say, are you one of those people who's got the 700,000 who've gone on to claim universal credit this time? But I have a funny feeling you aren't, because a funny feeling you're at work. Let's talk to my next guest, Lord Redwood. He's a Conservative peer, former Cabinet Minister, of course, and joins us right now. A very good afternoon to you, Lord Redwood.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. So I want to ask you about these universal credit figures first. The number of universal credit claimants hitting a record 8.4 million. I mean, the number is off the... I mean, it's just madness. A population of 70 million, 8.4 million of working-age people claiming universal credit. It's up 700,000 just in a year. This at a time we were told that the government was going to clamp down on this.
Well, indeed, and they've done two big things wrong. They first of all destroyed a very large number of jobs with their jobs tax and their higher business rates and their very expensive new regulations, so that employers not only can't afford to take on new people, but they're often having to shed labour, so fewer people get the opportunity to get work. And then they've opened the doors ever wider on the sick note for life culture, which is what we need to clamp down on. Yes, a limited number of people are very disabled, and we all want to make sure they're properly looked after and they get decent money without too much hassle. But lots of others now are not going to be sick for life and should be out there working, because if they've got a mild mental health condition, they'd probably be better off with company and something to do than sitting at home worrying about
it. I mean, the evidence is very, very clear. One of the best cures for those sort of mental health issues, the low-level ones, is work and structure, company, outdoors. But this is the thing. This is just grown and grown and grown and grown. And whenever anyone talks about reform, I know you're a Conservative, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Robert Jenrick, the Treasury spokesman for Reform, has been talking about dealing with welfare and cutting foreign claimants, workfare effectively for able-bodied people. If they can organise that through the councils, I'd say good luck to them. But I like the principle, and basically getting rid of PIP. They sort of basically want to take 2.8 million people off the universal credit, particularly the PIP claims aspect of this. That as soon as people talk about this, you get the left, and the media would do this as well. It's like, oh, they suddenly get somebody in a wheelchair saying, I'm worried about losing my benefits. But we aren't talking about people with serious disabilities, either mental or physical, losing their benefits. No one is doing that, but we are talking about millions of people who could and should and would be better off working.
Well, indeed. I mean, the Conservatives came out with a thought-through and properly costed package for 23 billion of savings not so long ago, and now Reform have come out and said they think they can double that. I think we need to look at the detail a bit more carefully. And I do think it's wrong to threaten seriously disabled people who need those benefits with very difficult tests or with the uncertainty about having to reapply.
But don't we need to have everybody, given an awful lot of tests have been done, people haven't been tested. I mean, we had the thing in the past where people were just being sent from pillar to post and having someone, who's just walked in off the street assessing whether or not their long-standing, clearly well documented by medics, long-term disability was valid enough. But now to someone on the phone going, computer says yes, you can have your benefits for life. Somewhere in between that's got to be right.
Well, I think it's got to be properly gradated to the condition of the person. So if you've got somebody who everybody can see from the file is very seriously disabled, you don't want to put them through any uncertainty or fear, but that's a very limited number of people. But at the other end of the spectrum, where you've got people who most of us think should just be trying to get to work or be in work, yes, you need conditionality. You need to be tough, and they have to be reviewed, and they have to be told in the review that it's not even right for them that they've got a sick note for life.
Yeah. It is bizarre, isn't it? And it's something I find very bizarre about the Labour Party. I was, unlike you, raised on the left, and I was always kind of brought up, it's a Marx quote, but it's very valid, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, and that work was good for you, good for everybody, noble, that you had a duty to work, and that the Labour Party was about, I don't know, this is a mad idea, Labour was about working people and was about helping the plight of people in the working classes. Yeah. I don't see how putting people on basically the rubbish tip of life, on benefits for life, people who could be working, should be working, and could have a so much better. I don't understand why anyone thinks that is a good or kind or indeed a moral thing to do.
No, it's completely wrong for those individuals, but it's also wrong for society. We're social animals. And in order to live in communities to a reasonably high standard of living, we depend on the work of others. And so surely if we can work, we should work, because we've got to make our contribution. That's the nature of being a social animal in a successful community. And I find it surprising that so many people think they should sit at home and do nothing when the rest of us are having to go out there and earn a living and make a contribution. And it is a them and us culture now. Labour is creating this big divide where a lot of people have to go to work, and then they have to pay excessively high taxes to support all the people who can't be bothered to go to work or are not made to go to work. Yeah. And there's also a big divide now emerging between public sector and private sector. I think the private sector increasingly feels that they're having to make all the sacrifices, pay all the extra taxes, and then they struggle to create the jobs that people need, and they get blamed. And the public sector can spend anything it likes. I mean, these latest earnings figures show public sector earnings going up 6.1% and private sector only going up 2.8%. Well, that doesn't look very fair.
No, indeed. It is just extraordinary, isn't it? So, talking of fairness, we've been talking about this morning. The Housing Secretary, back in the job as Housing Secretary, Angela Rayner, she on Monday removed key rules used by residents and local councils to block illegal encampments, particularly those by traveller groups. She made the changes in her update to England's planning rules. The two crucial changes, but under the previous rules, councils could consider potential environmental damage caused by unauthorised encampments when assessing applications, and also that the sites should only be approved if they provide a settled base that limits the need for long-distance travelling. Both those requirements have now been removed, so much harder to oppose, but we have seen a 73% rise. It's gone up by 3/4 the number of unauthorised traveller caravans across England over the last 5 or 6 years. This is a big issue. Large traveller families, and we're not talking about the 6 caravans, we're talking about 30 or 40 turning up on a site. Sometimes someone else's field, sometimes a field that land they've bought themselves, but without any planning, and basically waiting till 1 minute past 6 p.m. on a Friday, and the concrete's laid, everything is built, roads done. God, it'd be great if we could get councils to work as fast as this. By the time complaints are going in on the Monday morning when the council reopens, it's job done, and very little is ever done to backtrack on this. Although, of course, if you'd put up a shed without planning permission in your garden, planning would be all over that, wouldn't it? What do you make of this? Because this really is a big issue in the countryside, and it's also about, let's face it, British fairness.
Well, of course it is, and it's another example of this two-tier world where if you go to work and you obey the rules, you then don't get your planning permission for a perfectly reasonable request, and you have all sorts of costs loaded upon you. And then if you decide you're not going to play by the rules at all, you can just turn up in somebody else's field and take it over and claim squatters' rights. Or also you can go on to make a lot of money if you actually buy the field first of all, and it's just an agricultural field, and then you decide to make a development site and then force the council into endorsing your development. You've made an absolute fortune out of exploiting the system and breaking the law. That's why people are so fed up with all this. And Angela Rayner is completely out of touch with most normal voters in England. They want the opposite of what she's doing. They want a tougher, fairer law, not a weaker law that allows the lawbreakers to get away with even more things.
And one of the things I find extraordinary, again, the Tories were in for 14 years, is, squatters' rights. Whether someone you could just go on holiday and someone could just move into your home, and if you call the police and go, someone is living in my home, I want them out. Police won't turn up, it's a civil matter, it can take a very, very long time. Same with someone just literally moving onto a farmer's land, travellers just go, no, that's it. Police won't do anything. I mean, I find this extraordinary. This is theft by any other name. Why is this not a police matter, and why didn't the Tories change the law so it became an instant, very quick police matter? These people have no right to be here. You can show that here, I own the land, I own the house. Job done, police remove them within an hour.
Well, I mean, the Conservatives did strengthen the law a bit, and in some cases it is a police matter, or it was a police matter, and they could indeed have gone much further. But it's very important that we get across to this government that what they're doing is totally unacceptable. And if a reasonable number of these caravans turn up, well, an unreasonable number of these caravans turn up and occupy a field in a small village, where's all the extra provision going to come from? The village doesn't suddenly have school places and
water supply.
All water supply and capacity and all the rest of it. You can't keep on moving big numbers of people around and expecting all the services to be there. That's the fundamental error successive governments have made over this current water shortage. It's not mainly to do with the weather, it's mainly to do with millions of new people and no new reservoirs.
OK, well, let me put that to you, because, I mean, talking about the water shortage, we were talking about Richard Tyson, the Reform deputy leader's got it in the ear and front pages of the Mirror and others, so basically having his Marie Antoinette moment about let them drink rosé, as one of our callers put it, by suggesting, stop moaning about the weather, you can have English sparkling wine. Look, it is a bit clear, because actually, most people live in, let's face it, homes without aircon. It's been a struggle. Farmers are struggling. It's not been very pleasant. If this is going to be the new norm, who knows? It'll probably rain for the next 6 years in the summer. But it is going to get hotter. We are going to have to adapt. And I agree with him. Rather just moan about it and try and fight the weather. But again, we don't have enough water. We had 11 million more people come to this country. A lot of them came under the Tory years. No one built a single new reservoir since, I think, 1990-odd. Possibly earlier than that. Why on earth are we not building reservoirs? Why on earth are we not building nuclear power stations and all the facilities that would be needed to keep energy going, to keep energy cheap so we could all get aircon and not worry about the cost, and to have enough sodding water so I could have watered my lawn all summer?
Well, because an awful lot of European environmental law, now British law, because we didn't repeal it when we got out of the EU, and the quangos that have been set up by successive governments make it impossible. I mean, I was an MP in the Thames Valley area for quite a long time, as you know. I and other MPs saw we were short of water and constantly building new houses to accommodate all the extra people. We got behind the Abingdon Reservoir scheme years ago. We even got Thames Water to agree they needed it. Regulator says no, not sure it's actually needed. We don't want any increase in bills to pay for it, which there obviously would have had to have been. You need a government that's got the courage to say to the public, yeah, I've got to build some new reservoirs, I've got to build some new gas-fired power stations, I've got to build some more nuclear power stations, and we're going to have the powers to make decisions and get on with it. And no government's been willing to do that, and they've hidden behind all these quangos and European laws, and we end up with nothing.
But look, it costs a lot of money, it takes a long time, and basically, by the time it comes online, by the time these things come on stream, I mean, there's something about a new reservoir that's been approved, it won't start basically being useful until 2040. How on earth does it take that long to build a reservoir and get these things sorted? I mean, I really don't think it takes that long in China. I really don't. But is it?
Well, it's ridiculous.
No, but is it that you don't get the benefits? So any government, any prime minister or environment secretary, anyone who approves this stuff, they know. Well, there's going to be a big cost. There's going to be a kerfuffle. I'll upset everybody. But there's no benefit to me personally or my party because it won't come online until 20 years later. Is that just a failure of long-term strategic thinking?
Well, it's a failure of long-term thinking, but it's also a failure to understand that these quangos and these laws are now getting in the way of the good life rather than supporting the good life.
And it's unaccountable power as well.
To build a reservoir. I mean, a simple reservoir, which farmers can put in on their land if only they were given the permits, involves some earth moving and maybe lining if you don't have a clay deposit nearby. And that should take a matter of months, not a matter of years. But why it takes 10 years or more for a reservoir is most of those years are taken up with rowing about it, having consultations, taking all sorts of technical reports on whether some bat might be inconvenient.
The lesser spotted newt,
and whether there might be some other issue about the wildlife and wildflowers and all the rest of it. Instead of just saying, look, we need to make sure that people have clean water to wash and to drink, and let's get on with it. If you had a war on, and let's hope we don't have a war on, all these rules and laws would be suspended and there'd be emergency powers. And if you needed a new reservoir, you'd put one in immediately. The diggers would go in a couple of weeks after you'd drawn up the little plan.
Maybe we need a war. Maybe that's what we need. But just finally, I want to ask you about the story we've been dominating the news. It's the only story on social media for the last few days. And it's a very, very sad story because it has included the story that's been going on for many weeks, the death of a young man, a father, a husband. And of course, talking about Jason Arday. A vigil was held at Trafalgar Square yesterday for Jason Arday. My guest in the studio was there. There were some extraordinary speeches where the Cambridge professor, it was said, was a victim of an assassination, of a lynching, of a racist media attack. What do you make of those claims?
Well, I agree. It's a terrible tragedy, and obviously my heart goes out for his family, and it's a needless death. But I don't think you can just blame the media. I think what Cambridge has to do is have an urgent and timely an account of what went wrong with all their processes.
Yeah.
If they feel they actually had the perfect professor, why didn't they defend him better? And if they didn't have the perfect professor, can they please make sure in future they know how to appoint one? I'm involved with, in a charitable way, with an Oxford college, and I see there the lengths they go to over senior appointments, and the academic specialists reviewing the candidates have to read a lot and write a lot and take up references from the people who know their work best before the college can come together and vote on who would be a suitable candidate.
Doesn't sound like any of that happened.
And that should have happened in Cambridge, and it appears it didn't. And so then critics were able to make criticisms of this man's work that should have been sorted out before they appointed him.
And then we would never have even heard of him.
No.
Yeah, indeed. Very good point. Lord Redwood, Conservative peer, former Cabinet Minister, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come back to Tom Slater, but I want to come back to you about the issue of like the reservoirs and things like that, because we constantly, yesterday we were talking about how we're going to have water, basically water meters being used effectively to ration water, different price surging in the summer for people who they could cut the water supply for, very effectively water rationing. Apparently Andy Burnham's not keen on this. We'll see whether he approves or disapproves it. It'll change every 5 minutes. We know it's Andy Burnham. Flip-flop Andy is the reason he had that nickname. But it is extraordinary that we worry about the high cost of energy, massive impact of the Iran war and the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, and indeed the Ukraine war on us because of our reliance on importing fossil fuels, which we need because we've got too many renewables and things. The lack of water, mass-scale legal immigration, increasing our population by basically 11 million people, but at no point anyone thinking we need to have some more, roads, houses, hospitals, water supply, energy supply. It is terrifying that our governments, one after one, every different political hue has failed on such a grand scale.
No, it is. And what's really depressing at the moment is that things like environment or the narrative around climate change just lends them a load of excuses. You have a sustained hot spell and everyone's like, well, of course, we're running out of water. You should be able to withstand that as a developed, supposedly relatively wealthy country. And then it's this thing where almost now the weather is being presented as something which can make or break the fortunes of a nation. The whole point about being a developed post-industrial revolution society is that you've broken that chain. It's not about you can produce the energy. You're in control
of the energy,
and you're in control of the environment around you. So it's one of those things where it's become a kind of alibi for decades and decades of state negligence, and we're just seeing that trotted out once again.
Absolutely, and by not just politicians, but also civil servants as well. By the way, breaking news, the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, he's done a pooled interview. He has said he's not embarrassed about his exchange of messages with someone pretending to be Donald Trump's White House Chief of Staff, saying, I handled it the right way. Now, this is someone basically pretending to be Susie Wiles, considered the most powerful woman in the White House, very, very close to the US President Donald Trump. It's first reported by Politico earlier this week. Concerns of the British Embassy meant the officials actually raised concerns of their White House counterparts. Publicly available. His number was publicly available, apparently. Wes Streeter, the Defence Secretary, Alex Norris, the Justice Secretary, the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Bryant, their names and numbers also available on the web. But basically, this is not the first time that they fear that Miss Susie Wiles' phone had been hacked again. A impersonator reportedly texted and called her contacts back in May last year to ask for cash and presidential pardons, extraordinarily. she has told colleagues privately that her cell phone had been hacked. But we are looking at, a number of messages. We don't know what the messages were. We know that, well, Andy Burnett didn't speak on the phone to the impersonator, and the suspicious activity was quickly reported to the appropriate authorities. But it's all quite bizarre that the Prime Minister should get a message from the White House Chief of Staff and not just double check.
Yeah,
who is this person?
Because when I first saw this story, I thought that, is this someone who somehow got control, if not of her phone, that somehow was kind of mimicking her phone number, that was something that... But apparently not. I mean, this was just someone impersonating her. Had also made, as you say, kind of calls to various different figures in American politics, but people kind of got wind that this wasn't her because of the way in which she was typing, the way in which she was supposedly speaking. The idea that the Prime Minister is just kind of wandering around taking messages from who knows what, presenting themselves in what way. I mean, I dread to think what happens when he gets an email from a Nigerian prince asking for a bit of support, Could end quite badly.
Very, very fair point. 12:27 is at the time. We're going to take your calls up next. This is Talk.
£5 million donation problem, which kind of triggered this whole by-election. Is that an issue for you?
No, I accept that most politicians are in it at the end of the day for the 100,000 a year that they get, and so everybody's in it for money. And if it was for security, and let's face it, look at Anne Widdecombe. She could have done with 5 million, couldn't she, for security? She's dead. And so, no, I don't. I think he was entitled to accept it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:29 is the time. Let's get to your calls. And Andrew's on the line in Hertfordshire. Andrew, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for
good
joining
afternoon, Tom. Hope you're both well. In relation to the traveller
Yes.
position, it's very, very interesting. Is living in a county that is absolutely under siege from this moment in time. What you're going to have in rural communities, you'll have illegal immigrants being placed into villages, so they'll be under attack from them. And then this will be the floodgate for a lot of problems. And you articulated it well, but it's clear you don't know the true problem.
No, I don't live in the countryside. We have Benedict Spence, who's in on Wednesday. I know he'll be able to talk about it tomorrow. He's talked about it as being a massive issue. He's got family in a very rural area.
So what they do is they acquire a piece of land, they pay a disproportionate amount of money for it in cash, and then they spread out, and over a weekend they put a caravan on land they don't own with a child in it, that becomes a care issue, and then that's what causes the problem. So you've got a situation where something illegal has happened, and then the police...
Wait a minute, then why are they putting it on land they don't own when they've just bought land nearby?
Because what they do is they spread out, and when you talk about them, they don't have caravans. A caravan must move every 35 days. They put mobile homes on there.
Yeah.
So the way out of this is to say that every traveller's site must have 50-50 illegal immigration with them in caravan. That is what you should do.
I just think that the law needs to be the same for everybody. I don't think there should be any protected characteristics. People just shouldn't discriminate against people because of whichever their background is, or ethnic group, or culture, or whatever it is. But the law just needs to be the same. And if any other group in the country couldn't just rock up and do that and get away with it, then neither should traveller families. We just need fairness. That's what we need.
If you knew what happened to our local school, where we fund every single child that has to be driven in a separate taxi to it, the attacks on the teachers, it's terrifying. And the one you should interview, it's the guy that swam across the Thames. He's a Times correspondent. I think it's Matthew Paris. He wrote a brilliant article about this. You should get him on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Julia, there's no humour around this.
I'm not laughing.
No, I know you're not. This is really nasty people being empowered by Angela Rayner, and it's going to end in death.
OK, Andrew, thank you very, very, very stern words. I need to stress, obviously, you know, not saying that I'm sure he doesn't mean it. He talks about some of the people who are behaving like this. That would not be about every single person in a particular community. I don't believe there's any group of people that are all nasty people. I just don't. I think people should be judged on their individual actions and words. Gary is in Leicestershire and wants to join us. Gary, you wanted to carry on and talk about this reaction to the death of Jason Arday and that vigil last night, and what else? Tell us what you want to say.
Hi, Julia. Yeah, great programme. The thing I find is the hypocrisy of it all. We've got a guy who sadly took his own life due to untruths that were formulated by himself and the system around him.
No one forced him to make any of those lies up.
No. And yet he took his own life. And now you have 90,000 people with Corbyn and Diane Abbott. I see them as bigots against white people. Have formulated this within a certain short period of time of this. Yet Henry Novak, who died of someone killing him as an Asian gentleman, we never found the truth until it was too late. And the system, the government, worked against anyone trying to show any respect to that young lad's life.
Yeah,
we just seem to be. It's a tale of not two cities, but two systems.
Yeah, and Nigel Farage was politicising his death, and apparently, you know, being dangerous language when he talked about his cold anger. But we've had a peer, you know, in Simon Woolley talking about a lynching and an assassination.
It's just ridiculous. It's like really the truth becomes the lie, and the lies and non-facts become the truth from the government and from the far left themselves.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
You're starting to see where's our future? Where are we going? Because every day, you know, I watch GB News and Talk, which I think is the only channels that actually will tell the truth. We're just being led down a path of disaster.
Yeah,
and it's just frustrating.
I couldn't agree with you more, Gary. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a quick break, 12:34. Up next, we're going to be talking about, well, talking of disaster, Russia aren't very happy about British drones being used to fire into Russian territory by the Ukrainians, and have said Britain will pay. What does that actually mean, and why is Donald Trump threatening to bomb his ally, Oman, on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz from Iran? We'll talk about all of that with defence and military analyst Colonel Simon Diggins up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. That was very quick, wasn't it? 12:36 is the time. Let's talk about the small matter of, Russia being a bit unhappy with us and threatening that Britain will pay for giving Ukraine the drones that have been used to fire not just against Russian forces in Ukraine, but now into Russian territory. Well, let's talk about this with Colonel Simon Diggins. He's a defence military analyst. A very good afternoon to you, Simon.
Julie, good afternoon to you.
Thank you for joining us. Now, Moscow's embassy in London has accused the UK of acting as an accomplice to bloody crimes and terrorist attacks by Ukrainian neo-Nazis. They're still doubling down on the neo-Nazi thing. Russia has threatened Britain with consequences. Britain would pay a higher price, they say, should it continue to support Kyiv with UK-made drones in its struggle against Vladimir Putin. What do you make of Russia's reaction?
Well, Julia, some of it is what you might call their normal reaction. They always react in a very kind of aggressive way to anything we do. I think particularly so with Britain. They perceive Britain as weak, and they see it as one of the weakest of the G7 countries.
Why on earth would they think that, Simon?
Absolutely, because of frankly years and years of neglect and our behaviours. So that's the way they see it. And there's also an historical background to this. It goes right the way back to 1919 and our attempt to strangle at birth the Russian Revolution. So there's a background and history to this, which is always there. But their reaction is there, and they will do something. I think we need to be straightforward about this. It may be something which is kind of demonstrative. We had only a few weeks ago a Russian destroyer firing rather randomly into the English Channel. And threatening a yacht, and that's kind of thing that could go on. But much more seriously would be some form of cyber attack and or sabotage, probably carried out by a proxy element or somebody who you might regard as plausibly deniable, because that is their pattern of behaviour in the past.
Well, this is it. But we've already seen Russians behind, various things. I mean, concerns of, the firebombing of the former Prime Minister Keir Starmer's home and his car and others. I mean, real concern that, that they are ramping the stuff up. Look, we only, it's not that long ago since we had the Salisbury attacks. It is an absolute miracle that hundreds or thousands of people didn't die as a result of that Novichok poisoning. We've had, the killings on our streets of by Russian assassins using toxins and poisons and the like. It's almost like, Vladimir Putin wants us to absolutely know. It's never plausible deniability. It's always with a smirk. Well, it wasn't us. Wink, wink. He wants us to know. And this is the concern. We know that he's facing ballistic missiles in territory in Russia where they could easily hit NATO territory. There's lots of talk recently, and we've had America warning the British government, the intelligence sources, that there could be an attack by Russia on a NATO country, one of the Baltic states, very likely, and they're testing our resolve. And whenever we talk about this issue, I'm always like, but I don't trust our resolve. I don't trust that we are willing to stand up to Russia, not just Britain, but NATO as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, some parts of NATO probably are. I mean, the countries further east, the Polands and Lithuanians, they look at the Finns, look at the Swedes. Yeah. Both countries joined NATO, having years and years of neutrality behind them. And countries like Poland spending nearly 5% of their GDP on defence. And even the Germans, who are very slow behind them, now have put money behind with the challenge and are doing something about it. We're still waiting, apparently, for the Chancellor's autumn statement to determine whether or not we're going to produce something or not. And that's the problem. We are literally, and as you rightly point out, the American warning is an attack could take place in weeks. But we seem to be no sense of urgency about this whatsoever. Part of it is the Treasury, and the Treasury's kind of, they war by spreadsheet, and they'll be ready for a Russian attack somewhere around 2035. And that's kind of part of it. But then there's the government, and it's been successive governments. You're the government. You are actually in charge. You can pull the levers. You can make a difference. Yeah. But for the Labour government particularly, that's very painful, because where's the cut's going to come? It's going to come in benefit, going to come with welfare, and various other kind of pet progressive politics projects.
But I mean, this is the thing, because we know we've got a chancellor. Really quite a lot of high hopes that, he was kind of he was going to be the grown-up in the room. John Healey, he'd been the defence secretary, very widely respected on all sides of the House of Commons, and that he had resigned 6 weeks before he was appointed as Chancellor from Keir Starmer's government. In his resignation letter, very clear, you're not giving us enough in the defence settlement. We cannot keep the country safe, and we need more. I think a lot of us were of the view he's done a deal, and he's not agreed to be Chancellor unless he's been guaranteed the money. By all accounts, what's coming out of Whitehall, he hasn't been guaranteed the money. So he's agreed to be in a government when he doesn't believe that we'll be spending enough to keep our country safe. Even the the 3% by 2030. It doesn't even touch the size of what we need to be spending. I mean, you think, it was 7. Okay, I know our economy's grown bigger, but it was 7% of GDP in 1938, and it was 50% by 1942, which is a bit of a giveaway of how much spending now can save money later. But Russia doesn't believe that the West is going to step up to protect. They were shocked that we protected Ukraine because we hadn't made it clear we would. They don't believe that NATO is united because it isn't. They don't believe that we would fight back because we won't. We've got America. They've basically used up all their ballistic missiles in Iran. The West is very, very vulnerable right now, isn't it?
It is, and we're dealing with a country that's fundamentally on a war footing at the moment. 40% of all Russian state expenditure is on defence. Figures not very dissimilar, the kind of figures that apply to us in the Second World War. Yeah. Now, there's no question about it. The Russian economy is in trouble.
And you can't move away from the war economy because there aren't any jobs.
Exactly. So he's created a problem for himself, but also the problem is that the solution to that problem is keep on fighting. And look for other opportunities. He's looking for something that he can actually call a victory. That is not going to happen easily in Ukraine, and so he looks elsewhere, and the Baltics are there. He's already declared that, in his view, the Baltics should have what he calls a limited form of sovereignty. In other words, directly under Russian control. Countries like Belarus would be an example for him of how that goes on. And he doesn't believe that the Baltics are, to kind of slightly paraphrase Bismarck, worth the bones of a single British grenadier. And we need to demonstrate that A, that we will take it seriously, and B, that we're prepared to put the effort and resources to try and do that. And I think at the moment the question mark still exists. Are we prepared to do that or not? And I fear the answer currently is no.
That is my worry. And again, with a lot of people, and it's particularly on the left, and we saw that. We've got Ed Miliband, senior figure in this government, who was leader of the Labour Party, who basically led that vote against it when David Cameron wanted to go and help in people being massacred in Syria. We all care about genocide sometimes, but not all the time, apparently. But this idea that war is bad, we're opposed to war. And there's been a full clip from Andy Burnham. They're 100% opposed to any illegal war. War's bad. Yes, war is bad, but sometimes you have to fight that war to not fight a worse war later on, or to defeat a force that is, dangerous. These are people, I think, who would question going to war, in 1939, 1940, and that is the real concern, that people don't get it. As someone who's been in war, and one of the things I've noticed, having privilege in my career of speaking to so many people like you who have actually served on the front line and done the actual business, the stuff that us armchair generals haven't been able to do and aren't up to doing, is that how many people who have been on the front line are actually the most wary of war because you know the full horrors and the full reality of it. But why is, what can we do to persuade people that we need to be able and willing to fight a war against hostile states, dangerous people like Putin, to prevent that war from happening in the first place? What would you argue to persuade the likes of Andy Burnham and everyone else?
I think the first thing you do is and you rightly bring the focus back to the Second World War. War is an instrument of policy. It may be a very ugly instrument of policy, but it's an instrument of policy, and any sensible country should be prepared to use that instrument of policy if the circumstances and time are right. So I think there's got to be a kind of a mood change. So look, there are circumstances, but we have to use force in order to achieve something. The challenge we've slightly got is that we had a period when we used it quite freely. I mean, the so-called period of Blair's wars, were very much wars of choice. This is different. This is an existential threat to our country and to our NATO alliance, exactly the reason that NATO was set up in the first instance. So there needs to be a really strong message from the government all time, across all its members, saying this is why it's important. And that message needs to be got right way down to schools. We need to talk about the politics of the Second World War, why Britain fought the way it fought during that period, and why it's also made difficult decisions in the past to go to war, whether it be the Falklands War, whether it be Sierra Leone, countries like that, where we made difficult choices, and say, look, we all recognise the ugliness of war. We recognise the effect of civilian casualties, and we understand that, and we understand people's horror about that. But sometimes there is no alternative.
Yeah, and that's what people don't get, isn't it? Was there an alternative in terms of Iran? Just finally, a bit strange to say, and finally, with extraordinary words from Donald Trump, and we've got the issues over, the Gaza peace plan is not looking very promising at all, understandably, when it involves Hamas. But Donald Trump threatening to bomb the beep out out of Oman if they don't play ball over his Iran war plan. But it's extraordinary, given they're on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz from Iran, and a close US ally, but threatening casually to bomb the beep out of an ally. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think this is the difficulty with Trump. I mean, I'm not somebody who can universally condemn President Trump, because I think some of his instincts are actually quite correct.
I agree with you, yes.
But there is also something about him, whether it be his bombast, whether it be his kind of firing from the lip tweets after midnight, etc., which are really unfortunate. And the Oman is not just a US ally, it's a very strong British ally. I had the honour of serving with the Omani forces for 2 years, and I know how strong the relationship is with them. So I hope somebody sensible in the British Embassy in Washington and elsewhere are saying to the Americans and saying, if we got a direct line to President Trump, up with this, we will not put. This is wrong. The Omanis have got a particular challenge, which is, as you rightly pointed out, they are the other side of the Strait of Hormuz. So geopolitically, they're absolutely challenged, and they've got a way of dealing with it.
They've got Yemen on one side, they've got Iran over there. I mean, good grief,
They actually do a huge amount in terms of creating opportunities to speak to people which otherwise don't exist, and actually threatening your ally because they basically disagree with you, a particular minor tactic. But I think is what the issue is at the moment about when the Straits should be declared open or not. I think is unfortunate. Keep those kind of threats when you really need them, but threatening an ally, I think, is inappropriate.
Colonel Simon Dickens, great to get your thoughts on all of that. Thank you so much. 12:47 it's time. Tom Slater, come back in either on the Russian threat, the threat from Donald Trump's intemperate language. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I think it's quite clear that whether you're talking about how erratic the US administration has become geopolitically and also the very serious, long-running threats that they are responding to, we need to look at ourselves as well and work out how we can respond to this. And you can only really do that from a position of relative strength. It's nice that with John Healey in post as Chancellor, as you were discussing there, one assumes that some sort of accord was made in relation to defence spending. How else could it have been the case? But we wait to see whether or not these targets around 3 or later on 3.5% GDP are going to be met, and if there's going to be a clear roadmap towards doing that. It's just this is a kind of luxury that we can no longer allow. Just let welfare spending balloon. Meanwhile, defence of the realm, which is the most fundamental, one of the most fundamental responsibilities of the state, it's just been allowed to wither.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Tom Slater. Up next, we're going to be talking about children becoming intoxicated with extremism on social media and a huge big court case against Instagram and Facebook boss Meta, starting in the US today. Will it change anything? This is Talk.
I don't think there are many communities in this country who want large numbers of men from very different cultures who've come here unlawfully, paying criminals. They don't want them amongst them, not because they're racists or they don't like people because of the colour of the skin or their religion, but it is just an unfair and very difficult burden to put on those communities.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 12:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Letting you know, David Bull is standing in just a couple of moments for Ian Collins. Right now, though, let's talk about a couple of big tech stories, because two interesting stories in the news. The Children's Commissioner, Dame Rachel D'Souza, has called for a range of curbs to be introduced on social media for under-16s amid concerns over a fascination with violence online. She says British children are increasingly becoming intoxicated by extremism. In fact, the curbs on social media, she's under 16s, but also 16 and 17-year-olds as well. In her new report, she says there's deep concern that children are being drawn into radicalisation and violence, fascination online, and yet they're talking about weapons, idolised violent attackers, sharing videos of beheadings and suicides, but they're routinely falling outside counter-terrorism efforts. Well, let's talk about this with Will Guyot, who's a tech journalist. Will, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I want to talk about what's been going on stateside as well, but I mean, this seems to me, I mean, you know, wise words from Rachel D'Souza, but again and again and again, we have more and more reports about kids sort of getting caught up in the wild west of the internet, seeing horrific stuff, which most of us would go out of our way to avoid, sharing it, glorifying it. But of course, this has an extraordinary impact on, you know, developing brains, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's an insurmountable amount of evidence now to suggest that certain young people are really badly impacted by social media and what they see. Yeah. And it's hard for anybody, even me as somebody that's still passionate about use of the internet and social media, to say it isn't happening. What needs to happen, what more needs to happen is the social media companies actually need to start taking this stuff seriously. There's only so many times Dame Rachel D'Souza can come out and say not enough is being done. Yeah. And there's only so many times the social network can say we're doing enough, because it's clear there's a gulf in between those two things, which I guess from the perspective of linking into the other major story, this is seismic gets thrown around all the time, right? Everybody talks about game-changing court cases and those kind of things. But this one that starts in the US today, Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, could be in line to pay out $1.4 trillion in damages if they lose this particular case.
Mark Zuckerberg might know this. Well, let me quickly explain to people what that is, because it's a massive court case against Facebook owner Meta. And it opens, you say today, over alleged breaches of privacy laws for children. So the trial stems from a lawsuit brought by 30 states, including the big ones, New York, California. It could force major changes to the way both Facebook and Instagram operate for young people, including infinite scroll functions, removing like counts and things like that. So you could have a massive impact, because we know a lot of those things are about driving money. But what makes this case different? Because we've had numerous cases, haven't we, being brought, and let's face it, most of them end up being quietly settled for large sums of money to make them go away. Doesn't look like, you know, if it's brought by US states, a lot of them Democrat states, you know, interestingly, they're not going to be states that are, they're not going to be suitors who are going to settle. What is the significance of this one?
Well, so the chickens are coming home to roost. We had an example in New Mexico a couple of weeks ago where Meta had to pay $500 million just for that particular state, because the judge said they needed mental health support for young people. And that's what that money was going into, fund initiatives there. I think if they can't successfully defend this one and brush it off, which of course they would want to do as a company, the floodgates are absolutely going to open. Now, $1.4 trillion for a company like Meta is essentially what the company is valued at on the stock exchange at the moment in the US. So there's going to be huge changes to the company if the product has to change, because it looks like they're going to have to remove infinite scroll. It looks, Julia, like they're going to have to put some proper age verification in place. Yeah. The court case says American parents are going to have to say whether they're happy or not for their kids to be on the platform. So these things are really big changes if they can go through. And if this happens in the US, everybody else will be piling in. It will all follow
suit. And the interesting thing is, of course, even if they lose this case, and again, it's an if, they have good lawyers, and a lot of them.
They do.
They're going to appeal. These things can keep going down the line for another 15 years. I mean, they really can. But this is the thing. I'm always in two minds on this. You know, I'm a mum. We've not had any issues with this in my household. I do think there is a big parenting issue in terms of what kids think, but I also get that, you know, you don't really get to control what your 15 or 16-year-old is seeing online, you know, at school or whatever. And that I do, you know, I know how I know how addictive, you know, scrolling on social media. X is the only one I really play on in my life, and I'm an adult. How the impact that has on children. We've had so many children being radicalised. We've had children committing suicide and self-harming and anorexia. We've seen that the trans campaigning that's gone. There's so much, I think, that's gone on that has been very damaging. But I also have concerns, and I don't think it should be a Wild West. I also have concerns that anything that involves the age verification being a very formal process basically will mean that they'll be able to identify every single adult as well, and I worry about controls for adults. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I'm personally of the view of nothing to fear, nothing to hide, but I absolutely understand why people wouldn't want to give tech companies all of their details. The amount of data breaches and leaks we have on a routine basis these days, if you don't consent to that, it doesn't make any sense at all that your information is being shared in those kind of ways. And we see overreach in every step when you give organizations your data and your personal information. So everybody has a right to be concerned about that. But we're in a place where something has to change. And I know that's a very general thing to say 3 minutes before the end of your show, but something does indeed have to change as to how young people are protected on the internet.
Well, we could just say that we only have those sites that are just for under 18s, and everything else is just left to adults. That's just for under 18s, and parents don't actually, you know, do that, and they don't have those sort of algorithms. And if parents don't look after that, then well, that's on them.
Yeah, that's quite possible. I think we're going to see a change over the next year or so. Court cases like this are going to come through. And parents' attitudes have changed now as well. Parents are more increasingly aware of the dangers of giving their kid a device and just letting them get on with it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank goodness for that. They're actually realising that. Will Guy, I hope you'll come on again. Really appreciate you joining us, tech journalist Will Guy. Tom Slater, you're always concerned about freedoms as well. I want kids to be protected. I think they're different from adults, but how do you do that whilst also protecting freedoms for adults?
I mean, that is the balance, isn't it? But I think a lot of this comes down to parental responsibility, which has been neglected over the years on this issue, I dare say. It really, really has. I mean, you get these parents. There was the last case in America. They had the parent saying, well, this kid, they've been basically on Instagram, I think, since the age of 8, 8 hours a day. And you think, well, where were the parents? I think they're just 6, in fact. Even it was like, this is a basic parenting fail, isn't it? Thank you very much, Tom. It's such a pleasure having you in the studio, talking, as always, in huge amounts of sense. David Bull, I hope we'll get more sense with him, is standing in for Ian Collins on his horse. Afternoon, love. Looking very dashing.
Thank you, that's very kind of you.
He does make an effort, does our David?
I do try.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. This report by Rachel D'Souza, the Children's Commission, is so interesting, isn't it? The fact that she's saying children are being indoctrinated by this extremism.
They're seeing some horrible stuff.
But it was unbelievable. I didn't realise the extent of this and just the imagery that these kids are seeing and the way the algorithms then propagate, and they see more and more of this. And